Mungu twaomba uilinde.
My friend and I are
barua toka Jaramogi na Kenyatta, wanauliza kama Kenya kuko sawa. Nikawajibu Kenya tuko na disaster, watoto wetu wanazidi kuzikana, na Tomboya ameshika tama, alituacha kama angali kijana. Je, angekuwa mambo yangekuwa sawa? Ndivyo walivyopanga Maulana. Deni mulizoacha bado tunalipa, na tumekopa zingine China, tukajenga reli pia barabara, zilizobaki watu wakasanya. So tujiangalie, tuko pabaya leo kuliko jana. Sikio la kufa halisikii dawa, tuko kwa Twitter tunajibizana. Tujiangalie bade, tuko pabaya leo kuliko jana. Tusipoziba ufa tutajenga kuta, tusake zetu tungali vijana.
Waumini kwa matrina, pasi kwa bima, kushoto fungu la 10, sadaka kulia. Ndio maana mbele ya kanisa mheshimiwa anakula sakramenti kabla ya raia. Siku za mwisho zimeshawadia, na Revelation inatuambia hii generation inachoma picha, ni generation yetu. So tujiangalie, tuko pabaya leo kuliko jana. Sikio la kufa halisikii dawa, tuko kwa Twitter tunajibizana. Tujiangalie kuliko jana, tusipoziba ufa tutajenga kuta, tusake zetu tungali vijana. Mishuki alisema tufungeni mikanda, ona leo twavuna tulichopanda. Kura zetu zilitugawanya, makabila na pesa pia tulimanga. So when you make your bed, usingizi gani tumelala? Tutajua tujui, Vision 2030 tabaki ni story. Tujiangalie, tuko pabaya leo kuliko jana. Sikio la kufa halisikii dawa, tuko kwa Twitter tunajibizana. Tujiangalie.
Lazima tutajenga kuta, tusake zetu tungali vijana.
Dosi aliniambianga freedom never comes for free. We vote tribe ama real cash, ask Boni. Tuna Roma lia mwezi itajesu plus dogi. Wal mzima Twitter keotindo fast body. Ban pictures in Africa, black coffee and none. I'm richer than my neighbor but we're both in a slum. If the rich always win, why should the popular run? Unless democracy ni what's use them only for fun. Na hii weekend tuko church tunauza sura kabisa. Post ya haga wenda poa sana na caption ya scripture. Kayo ndo gospel pitisha bagi ya sadaka kwa club, yeah. Traffic madrag mbaindai, traffic mandai zina drag. But maya mwizi amemeki stories za shamba amegrab. Kono inahonga imevaa bracelet ya colors za flag, yeah.
Vijana wa kizazi cha sasa nchini Kenya wameshtua ulimwengu.
Mapambano, mapambano, bado mapambano, 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 bado mapambano.
Kingora, 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 kingora.
Prisoners wame escape from their mental slavery. Ndo maana wanatuma vifaru na mambaru kutupiga maridhi. Sauti tunapaza tukisema tumereject. Sauti tunapaza tukisema tumereject. Tunatutax to the max. Ndomu tumalize mujaze mifuko zenyu na ganji za ofisadi. Tumeshikana kama wala.
Niko tayari kulipa gharama. Niko njaa hata siwezi karanga. Uwe hae shagala bagala. Niko tayari kulipa gharama. Sitasimama maovu ya kitawala. Sitasimama maovu ya kitawala. Ufisadi, ubinafsi, ukabila. Kuuza sura wataki kuuza sera. Undugu ni kufaana. Sitasimama maovu ya kitawala. Sitasimama maovu ya kitawala. Hard to get wadhifa, una deserve bila kasha makashfa. Hii society Kenya wanaeza share ni nyungu ya busa ama ketol ya shisha. Mfuko zinasikia echo. Unajua thamani ya mali na size ya kifuli. Eyo, ujaibiwa jua unakaa kitu worth. Risking jail time, police bullet for. Unaweza argue crime doesn't pay, lakini huwezi dismiss justice in a bay. Mwizi ana 40 days, 365 days later anaendelea kugrow fatter. Do anything for power, ready to lose their head for presidency. Bora waione kwa currency. Sababu gani siko affected na turbulence? Nikifly angani, nimezoea the same feeling. Matatu zikipitia pothole mtaani. Juliane, yeah, yeah. Niko njaa hata siwezi karanga. Uwe hae shagala bagala. Niko tayari kulipa gharama. Sitasimama maovu ya kitawala. Sitasimama maovu ya kitawala. Ufisadi, ubinafsi, ukabila. Kuuza sura wataki kuuza sera. Undugu ni kufaana. Sitasimama maovu ya kitawala. Sitasimama maovu ya kitawala. Joe raise funds, itabidi raise hands. Growing concern, breakfast at croissant. Hataki punguze bei ya bidhaa. Tunataka opportunities ndio tu afford hizo bidhaa. Walisema kutembea kwingi ndio kuona mengi. Nimeshinda nikitembea maofisi na sijaiona kazi. Sezi cheza golf kwenye Tiger Wood. Mambo si barabara, Chingu. naomba jani maskins, chakula ifike tumboni ikitoka kwa sahani. Policeman anapiga rungu, mwalimu daktari anamurushia tear gas, na mtoto wake anarudishwa nyumbani, hana school fees, analipa peanuts. Hata siwezi karanga, uwe hai shagala bagala, niko tayari kulipa gharama, sitasimama maovu ya kitawala, sitasimama maovu ya kitawala. Ufisadi, ubinafsi, ukabila, kuuza sura, wataki kuuza sera, undugu ni kufaana, sitasimama maovu ya kitawala, sitasimama maovu ya kitawala. Si was a state house, na la twins a ghetto, ziupatana Nairobi River, no more nita live by hand to mouth. Ushasikia maskini na ugua gout, nikiwa na nguvu ya kung'oa reli, definitely kuinua kura si nzito. Ukiingiza kwa ballot box, chagua kiongozi wa kweli. Moha, Jona la Namu, jicho pevu, wakianika mkono refu, ina pickpocket wanyonge, na vaa maska za goalkeeper wa hoki, wezi ni kerubo. Kenya ni kama boxing, hakuna sub, work with what we have. Niko njaa, hata siwezi karanga, uwe hai shagala bagala, niko tayari kulipa gharama, sitasimama maovu ya kitawala, sitasimama maovu ya kitawala. Ufisadi, ubinafsi, ukabila, kuuza sura, wataki kuuza sera, undugu ni kufaana, sitasimama maovu ya kitawala, sitasimama maovu ya kitawala.
Attention, ladies and gentlemen, for all purposes of the day, if I'll never keep a promise, the only promise I've kept is to start at say 9:30. We intend to begin. For those of us who are outside, please come in so that we start. We'll start our sessions with the national anthem and the anthem for East Africa. We shall be led by Timothy Kimayo. Then we'll do opening remarks and a keynote speech will follow. So if you listened to me earlier, you should have taken tea, and so I believe we have some energy. I want to request Timothy, but just to inform you that my brother Okado, Frederick, and Kimari Brian will be guiding this process. My name is Zedekia Dika. I work in Mombasa. I lead the network for the Coast Civil Society Network for Human Rights, and I'm an advocate. So today I didn't go to court to come to speak here. So I want us to be very keen, because people have taken their time to be here to do this. You're welcome. Feel free to speak to your colleagues next to you, but consultation should be in low tone. Timothy Kimayo, are you ready? We are requested to stand up for the national anthem.
E Mungu twaomba uilinde Jumuiya Afrika Mashariki, tuwezeshe kuishi kwa amani, tutimize na malengo yetu. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuwajibike, tuimarike, umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu. Uzalendo pia mshikamano viwe msingi wa umoja wetu, na tulinde uhuru na amani, mila zetu na desturi zetu. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuwajibike, tuimarike, umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu. Viwandani na hata mashambani, tufanye kazi sote kwa makini, tujitoe kwa hali na mali, tuijenge jumuiya bora. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuwajibike, tuimarike, umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu.
Unlock the GoDaddy.
As we sit down, Thank you so much. Welcome to the launch of the Talk to Your Regulator initiative that is being conducted today here at Sarova. Welcome all of you. Whoever has not taken tea, you can take a cup of tea and sit down with it. We have organizations all over the country, and those that work all over the country. They could be from Nairobi, but they work all over Kenya. We have organizations from the coast, and we also have organizations or an organization from Uganda. So Jumuiya is well represented. We will have a keynote speech, but later that will be done by Dr. Lagzama Kipto, the Director General, Public Benefits Regulatory Authority. He will join us after some time. At this particular moment, so that we walk together and we know why we are here, I want to call upon the Executive Director for Muhuri, Mr. Walid Kasim, to welcome us to this event. Karibu Walid.
Good morning, everyone. I hope we've all had tea. So I had a write-up on what we are going to have today and what we are going to do. So before I read it, my name is, for those who don't know me, Walid Kasim, the Executive Director, Muslims for Human Rights, Muhuri. So I'll proceed to read it's a small speech that summarizes what we are going to have. So once again, our guests and colleagues from the various regulatory bodies, our development partners and colleagues, and also fellow comrades and all organizations represented, good morning. So it is indeed a great honor and pleasure to welcome you all to the official launch of the Talk to Your Regulator Kenyan chapter. Today marks a significant milestone in our collective journey to strengthen the relationship between the public benefit organizations, PBOs, and the regulatory institution that guide and govern our work. We are gathered here not just as stakeholders, but as partners in a shared mission to cultivate trust, enhance transparency, and foster a more enabling environment for the not-for-profit sector in Kenya. The presence of such a diverse and distinguished group from government regulators, civil society leaders, development partner, and regional colleagues speaks volumes about the importance of this initiative. It is a testament to our shared commitment to open dialogue, mutual respect, and collaborative problem solving. As many of you know, the regulatory landscape for PBOs in Kenya is quite complex. While it is essential to uphold standards of accountability and compliance, it is equally important that these frameworks do not stifle the very work they are meant to support. The Talk to Your Regulator initiative is our response to this challenge platform. Is our response to this challenge. It is a platform also where regulators and civil society can meet as equals, where they can exchange perspectives and co-create solutions that work for all. So, ladies and gentlemen, let this launch be more than a ceremonial event. Let it be the beginning of a new culture of engagement, one where dialogue replaces distance and collaboration replaces conflicts. As one of the convening organizations, Muhuri, Muslims for Human Rights, is proud to be part of this transformative journey. For over 2 decades, Muhuri has championed human rights, social justice, and civic engagement across Kenya. Our commitment to protecting the civic Our commitment to protecting the civic space and amplifying the voices for marginalized communities aligns deeply with the goals of this initiative. We believe that accountability and transparency must go hand in hand with inclusion and dialogue. And on behalf of the organizing partners, Muhuri, Civic Advisory Hub, Civic Freedoms Forum, CFF, our vice chairman is there and he'll elaborate more on what we do, as well as the National Working Group on FATF. We warmly welcome you to this important occasion. We look forward to a discussion of rich discussions, shared learning, and renewed partnership. Once again, thank you for being here, and thank you for being part of this journey. Karibuni sana. Sante.
Thank you, Walid. I wish I told you to speak in Swahili. You have urged us to exchange perspectives where we are, to infuse in our work a culture of engagement, but with it, even as we cry for compliance, we also ensure that accountability is enhanced. Thank you. I want to call upon my brother Yona Wanjala, the Executive Director for Civic Advisory Hub, to also make a statement. Karibu ndugu.
Habari zenyu. Wanasema habari ya asubuhi ama? Someone told us that the Swahili died from my country, but I think it's still alive. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me right on the existing protocol and welcome you to this inaugural event for launching the talk to your regulator. Once again, Yona Wanjala is my name. I'm the Executive Director of the Civic Advisory Hub, a platform that works in the Sub-Saharan Africa sub-region to shape, strengthen, and shift a narrative in line with the civic space, but with a key focus on the policy regulations that pertains money laundering, terrorism financing, and illicit financial flows. Of interest to us, we've realized that these policy regulations have one way or the other been misapplied to affect the civic space. And we thought it is wise to make a contribution in this area through research, through capacity building, and through advocacy. Colleagues, I just wanted to explain to that, that's where we come from at the Civic Advisory Hub. But also to thank you, colleagues from Kenya, to invite us. I always relate it to one of my admirable writers, Chinua Achebe, who said that when a man invites kinsmen for a feast, it does not mean that they don't have food at their place. Neither does it mean that they don't have compound where they can see the sun or the moon. But they do so because it is good. It's only good to do so. There are fine brains on the continent that you would have invited. But I thank you for inviting the Civic Advisory Hub. We believe and appreciate the ecosystems of the civil society in saving civic space. There are those ones who would wish to be combative, there are those ones who would wish to dialogue, and there are those who would wish to play safe, and all of us work for the good of the sector. Colleagues, we do not fight what we hate because we might not have the capacity. but we strive to save what we love, and that is an enabling working environment. And we believe that every glitches of conflict end up on the table. And sometimes we take a lot of time to speak to ourselves about the shrinking civic space. But we thought it would be wise as the civic advisory to yet talk to the regulator. Now in this talk, we as members of the civic sector, we need to think like regulators. If you were a regulator, what would you expect your regulatees to do? But also, the regulators need to think like civil society. If they were civil society, what would they expect from the regulator? And that it will help us have a balanced tone. Colleagues, this initiative, a product of the Civic Advisory Hub and Defenders Protection Initiative, both in Uganda, has gained traction, and we've seen it shaping a narrative. It has opened doors where civil society can knock doors and negotiate positions, push back through diplomatic engagement, closed door engagement, and open door advocacy forum for the good of the sector. We're happy to also see it being launched in communities like the Zimbabwe as a country, and our colleague from Zimbabwe, we shall introduce him at the opportune time, is here to share his experience of what Talk to Your Regulator can do for the sector. We intend to do this across nations of Africa as a dialogue platform where we talk and give feedback to each other as the sector. The regulators give us the feedback, and also we give them the feedback. If we say we do not have sins, we deceive ourselves and there is no what? Truth in us. Maybe as the sector also, there are certain places that we need to put right. But also, the regulator, there are certain places they need to put right. When we talk to the regulator, we mainly don't focus on only one regulator. That is the main PBO. I think at an advanced level, we shall need to bring other regulators that either indirectly or directly shape our space. Like the revenue authorities, who in one or the other slap on us tax fines which we do not know. The social security funds, whom we are obligated to work with closely, but also to save for the staff. The data protection office, you know you have an obligation for data protection. These are several other regulators that we need to bring on board. Without taking a lot of time, I would wish again to thank you and bring greetings from Uganda. We love you so much, both in good politics and bad politics. We really love you, but also being people of the same region, East Africa, we are brothers and sisters. Asante sana. Thank you once again, all the coordinating entities.
Asante ndugu. Thank you so much, and let me acknowledge the presence of our colleague from Zimbabwe. Karibu Kenya. Welcome. I picked from you that policies that we have should not just be used to further stifle the space, but should open up the space. We should not take too long before we speak to the regulators, but then the regulator is not just one. We should talk to all of them, and we should use those diplomatic forums to ensure that engagement for the sector is beneficial to all of us. I want to request that whoever comes, mwambie akuje huku mbele. Hakuna headmaster huku na mwalimu wa maths, ni sisi tu. I want to now call upon my brother Joshua Changwony, the Vice Chair for Civic Freedom Forum, CFF, to say a word or two. Karibu.
Thank you very much, Bwana Moderator. Good morning, all of us. My name is Joshua Changwony. I'm the Executive Director of Regulator-Kenya and Vice Chairperson of the Civic Freedoms Forum. Allow me adopt the protocol already observed in this room and begin the conversation that CFF is a network of 12 civil society organizations at the national level. This includes PEN Kenya. I think it would be of your interest also to just understand the entities, and if it's of your interest also to be part of us. TI Kenya, I see they are represented here. Kenya Human Rights Commission, which chairs this network of ours currently. We have InformAction, we have Muri, Akietu, Inuka Kenya, Regulator-Kenya, Inclusive Initiative Empowerment, and then Defenders Coalition, Article 19, IMLU, and other associates that work very closely with us on civic space. Our business is to protect civic freedoms, as well as also protection of human rights, civil liberties, as well as also democracy in general. And this is in Kenya and beyond. My remarks will dwell on, you know, when I hear the word regulator, I mean, it doesn't sound very attractive. You hear regulator, you think, even this name called the authority. I've challenged the Director General of the authority there that this name is not very attractive as such. But I think the history of that name, when about more than a decade, when it was being put together, the sector members didn't want to be under a board like the defunct NGO coordination board. We wanted an institution that is on the stature of the Kenya Revenue Authority, the NTSA, the National Construction Authority, so that it attracts attention as well as also funding from the exchequer. But again, we said, okay, the authority, let them get the name, but I think the business of the entity called the Public Benefits Organizations Regulatory Authority is to enable, is an enabler to ensure that the sector members enjoy doing their business in an environment that is protected by the rule of law. And I say this because currently there is an ongoing national conversation on the commencement and implementation of the BPO Act of 2013. And currently there is the formulation and the harmonization of the regulations, which I think is also a center of our interest as sector players. I know regulators is in plural form. There are others. I know some of us are registered under the register of companies as societies, some with the authority. And I think this conversation is timely because we must have an harmonized conversation as well as also dialogue, so that people who are a company limited by guarantee are not in a comfort zone in a particular corner, and those ones who are under the authority are also in another corner while we all do charitable work. And I think this conversation is going to enable us be in a podcast, the regulator. We have a component which is called self-regulation. It's a very important provision. And this is the Public Benefits Organization Act of 2013. Last week, we were with the authority in a breakfast meeting where we had a very senior member of the sector who works in an INGO, and he said that he's worked in this sector for almost 30 years in Asia, in South America, and other parts of developed, parts of this of the world. And there are laws that govern civil society work, but he's never come across this self-regulation. He's seeing it for the first time here in Kenya. And he was trying to inquire, where did we get the self-regulation? And I think the conversation then was, the sector needs to be an example. As we check on government, our practices among us ourselves should be regulating in itself, as opposed to getting an external person to come and check on us. And I think that is something that our neighbors are even yearning to learn from us. So even as we pilot in our country, because I am told that a lot of borrowing was done in the UK and South Africa, which even do not have a very strong self-regulation mechanism, I think it is yet to be witnessed in our country, and I think that is an area that probably we need to demonstrate that it is possible. Then lastly is this sector is a leader in terms of practice and ownership of certain values. And that is why we are talking about the sector code of conduct. And here I want to share with among us with a story. Last week I was having a conversation with one of the leaders of the regulators here in our country, and I was disputing the fact that the civil society sector is not an enabler of terrorism. And I was even telling him that is misinformation. That is how we are being labeled with funny names, just to demean the work that we do. And the guy just told me, just listen a bit. Do you ever do printing to educate the public? That is IEC materials. Walid, I can see we have them on our table here. And it's like you've gotten funds from a particular donor, but there is this service provider who is so attractive in terms of rates, who is so attractive in terms of even payment. They don't harass you. They tell you, please, as long as you give us your LPO, you can pay at your wish, even within 3 months, something like that. It's very attractive to do business. But that person who is doing printing services can be an agent of terrorism, because the proceeds of the business can be funding somebody somewhere to come and do terrorism activities. So where is the source of the money? It is from the sector members. Same, we get services from hotels such as this one, and I'm not trying to say that this is one of them, but I mean, we use venues. And you know, you could get very attractive services from a venue, or an owner of a hotel, or let's say a marketing manager of a particular hotel. And we'll tell you, in a year, if you give us 10 services, let's say 10 meetings, we will give you 3 complimentary. Who doesn't want such kind of an attractive way of thinking? But now there's the aspect of doing due diligence to say, why is this deal too good as opposed to the competitors in the space of this particular business? And indirectly, you'll have become an enabler of what? Terrorism. So I say this conversation, Walid, is very important, because these things come to us indirectly without even knowing that we are supporters of some of these ill practices that happen in our world. Thank you so much, and may God bless you.
Thank you so much. When Vice Chair, I picked a lot from you, but the fact that the authority should be an enabler, in fact, we should change that name, authority, to facilitate. Then we should also practice, and the good example of self-regulation that you have shown us, and the fact that what we practice should also be showing out there as some of the best things that align with the values that the sector stands for. As we proceed with this conversation, I want to call upon my brother Linus Ofware to kindly come and say something. Karibu. Welcome to the dais.
Okay, good morning. My name is Linus Ofware from the Office of the National Security Advisor. I'm a career police officer. In the Office of National Security Advisor, basically what we do there is we have two major roles. One is the National Security Advisor herself is a secretary to the National Security Council. And two, we also give various advisory roles to the executive. And myself, in that particular office, my area is on the security sector reforms, where we try to work with various agencies, the National Police Service, the NYS, the NGAO, and Prisons Department to see how effective they can be able to adapt to various reforms parameters. And my attending this particular function basically was to come and see how we can be able to provide space for organizations to thrive and grow, even as they comply to various government regulatory requirements. And this one, basically the questions that we are asking is how do we make the structures to be more predictable and the environment to enable, as the previous speaker has just said, organizations to thrive, to grow. How do we make our expectations very clear so that these regulations, they should have what we can refer to as consistent routines and schedules, whereby if you are required to provide maybe reports, then they should be in a way that it's known what time these reports are expected and what are the indicators that we are supposed to provide. And also, we should also be able to build clear communication structures, basically on practice, what you do, why you do, your objective as an organization, and also open feedback structure, whereby you can be able to talk to your regulators, you can be able to talk to the government, you can be able to talk to different government agencies on what you expect of them and why things are happening the way they're happening. That feedback mechanism should also be there. And secondly, we should be able to build positive relationships, whereby we should cultivate supportive environment. We should be able to have a collaborative and symbiotic relationship, whereby you as organizations and we from the government side, we feel it's a system that needs each other to exist, needs each other to survive, not whereby one agency is there to suppress, but to promote the growth. And then thirdly, this particular initiative should come up with ways of addressing various challenges that we do face in the sector, that we do have also in the government. And we should be able to identify early enough what are the triggers of some of these challenges, what makes it hard sometimes for us to communicate between one another. And lastly, we should have very, very strong coping strategies so that when a challenge comes up, we don't see an organization sinking with it. Rather, we should address that challenge in a way that we make the environment more supportive and more accommodative to the needs and the development of our country at large. So basically, for me as a person, I find this particular forum a very, very good environment for us to fish what we may need to put down in our various advisories that will eventually reach the executive office and may, in the process, also inform various policies that are developed from that particular office. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is nice, listening to a police officer speak so fluently. And and speaking about reforms in the sector, and the fact that they want to promote growth from our side. I think that is a conversation I would want to have with you. To proceed with this conversation, I want to invite a special person, Ms. Gatiria Boroki, from the East Africa Police Chiefs Cooperation Organization. Karibu. Karibu sana. Tungekuwa enzi ya baba, tungekuwa nasema 1, 2, 3. Karibu. Baba Moi, sio baba.
As a center, as a country actually, which should hold the counter-terrorism center of excellence for the East African region. We deal with the 14 countries within the East Africa, but the center is based here in Kenya because of the best practices and at the far Kenya has gone in fighting terrorism within the region. As you know very well, Kenya, we started getting the attacks. We remember very well from 1998, that is when we started, and that is when the East African region came into contact with the real what is terrorism and how to deal with it. Before that time, we didn't have so many of those events. We are hearing them in other countries, but now it came down here in Kenya, within the East African region, in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. If you can remember those who were born by that time and they were working, you know what happened. And right here behind we have the bomb blast with us within Kenya. So this office, they came together, the East African police chiefs, they came together. We have another center for Marine, which is in Tanzania. In Uganda, we have the community policing. In Sudan, that is in Khartoum. In Rwanda, we have the cyber crime center. So that's how they are distributed within the region. Here in the center, our main mandate is we deal with the threats and analysis of the terrorism within the region. How are they moving within the region, maybe from Kenya to Uganda and to Tanzania, but we don't basically base within the East African region. Remember, we have the ISIS which are coming from the Red Sea. We have something which is happening now down in Congo. You don't know what is happening there. We have things which are happening like the Boko Haram. We have also to check on what's the effect which it has for the East African region. And as you know very well, technology has advanced. It's not that where you are saying that people use the bomb, the suicide, and what have you. There is advancement in technology on the use of terrorism. When you look at it, we have biological, we have chemical, we have radioactive. You don't know even what you are hitting, whether it's bomb or something like that, and you can put it to terrorism in the perspective. So we do a lot of research and to follow the trends, the trend which is taking within the region and also outside the region, because you cannot just say I'm going to look on what is happening at home. Also, our office, we deal with planning and coordination of operations within the East African region. We do some practices on how prepared are we in case of any attack, how prepared are we? And these operations, they are done within the region, within the country. We give a case study, and from there, the officers and other stakeholders who are involved, how best do they respond to an attack? How do they respond? Are they really equipped? And from there, when they go back, they do an evaluation for themselves as a country. How best are we equipped? When you look at the medical, when you look on the communication part of it, and the police officers, what are they doing at that time? We also do table exercises, a lot of them, so that to see how prepared are we as a country, when not as a country but as a region, because here, as we are based in the region, how prepared are we as a region? We also, one of the next mandate is the best practices. When you talk about the best practices on the region, you have to compare what is Uganda doing, what is Tanzania doing, what is DRC is doing, because also they belong to the East African region. What can we learn from them? We exchange ideas and knowledges amongst the region. Also, on that, we do a lot of capacity building, and this capacity building is basically for the law enforcement officers and other stakeholders who are related with the work in support of fighting of terrorism within the region. When we are talking about the capacity building, there is a lot of training. How do you respond if a case happens? The first responders, here we talk about the first aid. It has to come even with the members of the public. How do they respond if an incident occurs? How do you save life? And also we look on the radicalization amongst the youth, not only the youth, but also the people who are living within a certain particular area. As you know very well, you cannot say that my religion is the best, because there is a lot of radicalization which is taking place. A very good case which I can give you, you know, Shakaura, you cannot say it was religion, you cannot say it was radicalization. There is something behind that, and you have seen there are some youth who have disappeared. If you watched the news yesterday, there is a youth there who has disappeared, and they have disappeared with a pastor. Why has a youth disappeared and what he has left behind? Maybe those are some of the things which we do. And also now I feel it is very good, because you know in terrorism there is a lot of finances which is involved, especially these days. There is a lot of transfer of money. Why is this money moving from this account? Where is this money coming from? Is it coming from Europe to Kenya? Is it coming from Somalia to Kenya? Is it coming from Tanzania to Kenya? Who is this person who is sending this money? And how can we intercept it? We have to look into depth into it. Where is this money coming from? As Changwani has said here, the money which you pay, the traders whom you see, the big business people, they have a lot of money. Where does this money come from? We have to look on the sources. Where is this money coming from? And as a result of that, we can be able to make our region safe, and particularly the East African region. We want it to be safe from these issues. And this platform, it's very good, because now we are going to interact with the civil society. It's a good platform for you people, the civil society, to come interact with us, so that we can be able to deal even on when people come back. How are we supposed to integrate them back to their society? Some evidence, but they cannot be accommodated in the society. What do we do as a country? What do we do as a society? What do we do as an organization? So those are some of the things which we do, and I feel this platform is very good, because now we know there is a lot of finances which are taking place online, and we have to check where it's coming from. And if at all we know the sources and we are able to follow the trends, it is a good score for us as a region, for the East African region, and we are going to sorry for that, and we are going to make our region safe. Also, we have a data. This data, we get information within the East African region. We filter this information, and we see which information is good for us, which information is not good for us. And if this information is going to lead to something, as I've told you, is the East African Police Chief. We communicate with the other country, and then we are able to come up maybe with an arrest or something like that. I think my brother from Uganda, there is a case which was referred to our office sometimes back, and we were able to follow up that case. Maybe this platform, the organizers, you could have involved also the people who deal with immigration, the immigration department, because I know very well now they have started a program for the personal information, so that as you board the flight, all your information is there. If maybe you have been red carded, there is a red flag, you are able to know, and from that one we are going to make our region safe. So with those many remarks, I welcome you to our office. We are based at Kiambu Road, DCI headquarters. Just come there and visit us so that we can have more information, more sharing with you. And I'm proud to be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The idea of visiting Kiambu Road. Yeah, karibu. It's very attractive. May I acknowledge our part of the participants who are online through Zoom. Karibu sana, we acknowledge your presence. We shall engage as time goes. From my sister, I picked a lot of things, but largely the idea that we need to expand who is a regulator, that includes the people from immigration, and the place of technology in this work. You've explained it so well, and your enhanced research. I was listening and I thought it could be a good idea to visit you at Kiambu Road to see the data, if we can see. At this particular moment, may I call my sister Millicent Awiti from NSSF to say a word. Karibu Millicent. Millicent, just before you say, I take this opportunity to acknowledge the presence of the Director General. Karibu Director, hatujaenda mbali sana, utatupata tu.
Good morning, everyone. All protocols observed. My name is Millicent Awiti from the National Social Security Fund. We are not a regulator as such. However, we appreciate this opportunity to be able to share a little bit about what we do at NSSF. So NSSF was formed in the year 1965 as a result of sessional paper number 10, which whose aim was to tackle the issues of poverty, ignorance, and disease. We have since grown to a semi-autonomous state corporation from the year 1987, being moved from the State Department of Labor to a fully fledged state corporation. And the next milestone was 2013, when the NSSF Act, which we are currently implementing, came into force. So why did we honor this invite today? First of all is that this sector forms a very large part of employment in Kenya, according to the economic survey. However, despite this, not very many of the people in this sector comply. Felt the need to be able to come and serve is the obligation to register with the fund as an employer, the actions, and remit this to the fund. The third is submission of in the prescribed format. And then lastly is to keep a record through some of the forums such as this one, supporting us through educational education. Why is social poverty? And the only way we can enhance social cohesion is promoting well-being of our staff, and that is through social security, or you remit for them their social security contributions on a monthly basis. I think I will stop there. Thank you very much. We do appreciate the opportunity to be able to share in this forum, and also the fact that a good number of employers in this sector are compliant with NSSF. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know she said she's not much of a regulator, but she's that person that all of us feels we all need to go to, so that we age with confidence. I want to call our next speaker from Interpol, Mr. Mark Owiti. Karibu.
Good morning, everyone. Let me also ride on the earlier said protocol. My name is Mark Owiti, attached to International Police Organization, also known as Interpol, regional office in Nairobi. It is also along Kiambu Road. Yeah, so just below the office where Madam sits. And for us, we are not regulators, and that one I'm very sure for that. And the police, International Police Corporation, and is grey listed according to the Financial Action Task Force in regard to handling anti-money laundering and counter financing in terrorism. And one of the key functions that we as Interpol does is capacity building to law enforcement officers. For us in the regional bureau for Nairobi, we coordinate actions within the 14 countries of East Africa, or Eastern Africa for that matter. So sometimes we deal with the trainings when it comes to issues to do with the financial issues, counterterrorism. So my boss was to be here. Currently the boss who is heading us is called Mr. Paul Africa. He's from Rwanda, and he's also out for official duty, and he assigned me to come for this workshop. And I'm seeing it's more focused on the regulators. For us, we are not regulators, but when it comes to enforcement, you know, for the police is the one who mostly deal with the issues of enforcement. So it's also a good opportunity for us to know that what do we expect, because it's also good when you enforce from a very informed perspective. For me, I will end there, and thank you for the opportunity. Okay.
Asante ndugu. Thank you so much for letting us know what Interpol does and that you're along Kiambu Road. So we are grateful for the insights that you've given us. We are moving towards the end of these speeches. I know they could be sometimes very boring, but we took tea, so we have energy to listen, and then we will have a conversation where Suba Churchill and Ms. Hilda Chiro and Enes Jamai will be, I know they have a lot of energy, will be able to ignite this conversation at that particular moment. At this moment, allow me the opportunity to welcome the Director General, Dr. Laxmana Kipto, to speak to us about this as he comes, I just wanted to say it. I don't think it's largely about the regulator. It's more about duty bearers, so that we can have this conversation with all duty bearers at ease. Karibu, Daktari.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to write on all the protocols that were established earlier before me. Sorry, I had to come late a little bit because there were some things that I had to do, but I'm glad I'm here. I just ended when Sibora was talking, and my friends from the Interpol and NSS7, they kept on saying that they are not the regulators. So I want to say that I am the regulator. Let me start by saying that because I was trying to acquit myself with the writings in the pamphlet here, and I come to realize that kumbe I'm the regulator myself. And my team were telling me in the morning, we are talking to colleagues and friends from Muhur. My colleagues from FRC are here. Anyone from FRC in the house? So I'm glad to be here this morning to have this conversation. As the NPOs, the non-profit organizations, and government here revert here as the regulator to have a conversation, so that we are going to have a working relationship together while maintaining the civic space, and so that we have an engagement as a country. This is better? Okay. So that we have a country and we work together towards some of the things that maybe some of us are taking for granted. I heard someone saying that we are told we are grey listed. We are not told. Actually, we are in the grey list. That's the truth. We are in the grey list, and if we do not do the things that we are required to do, we will be in the blacklist. And if we go into the blacklist, all of us are going to sink. The government plus all of you. Are we together? You know, sometimes non-profit organizations or civil societies think that if government sink, they will not sink. We are in this boat, all of us, as a country. And I wish all of you were in Dar es Salaam last month with us when we were doing the face-to-face reporting about what Kenya is doing as wholesome for us to be removed from the grey list. That is when you will realize how serious this thing is. When the guys from Giambu Road were being asked how many cases have they investigated, when the ODPP, when the judiciary are asked how many cases are in conclusion, when the banks, the regulators are told how many amount of money they've been able to freeze, when the Assets Recovery Agency, ARA, are asked how many assets have they frozen. When I was asked how many NPOs in Kenya are at high risk of terrorism financing, you can guess the answer I gave. I said, nah, I do not know. When I was asked, have you come out with a framework to implement the high risk based approach, I said, I have not. And that's why we have this conversation. Are we together? Yeah, so that you don't live in your own world where you think that you are in a vacuum somewhere. We are all interdependent and we need each other. And that's why we are here. Let me start by saying that distinguished guests, esteemed regulators, development partners, civic society leaders, ladies and gentlemen, good morning once again. I want to extend you warm greetings from the Public Benefits Organization, Regulatory Authority, and by appreciating each of you for being present today for this necessary conversation and a timely intervention and recommitment to our collective responsibility to Kenya's development and democratic vibrancy. Allow me to acknowledge the efforts of our hosts, Muslim for Human Rights, Muhuri, the FATF Kenya NPO Working Group, the Civic Advisory Hub, and Protection Initiative for their leadership in convening this letter. And I'm deeply honored to be part of this initiative that is so vital and so visionary, so aligned with the ethos of inclusive governance and effective regulation. I know there are some people who, when we talk about regulation, they are thinking about we are gagging each other. What we are only saying that we should be doing things in an orderly manner so that all of us respect the law as it is. And you can be held accountable for everything. The public benefits organizations are indispensable partners in our nation's development. And let me just give you some statistics to highlight or to justify that statement. Is that according to our annual land use sector report of 2022-2023, BBOs mobilized 196 billion in funding, with 77%, which is approximately 141 billion, generally directed to local projects across the country in different sectors. And these investments have significantly impacted sectors such as health, education, child welfare, conservation, disaster, gender empowerment, and advocacy. The sector bolstered employment, supporting over 79,000 jobs across various counties in the country. However, the heavy reliance on foreign funding, nearly half from North America, highlights the need for diversified and sustainable local funding mechanisms. And that's where we come in as a regulator, that the operationalization of the PBO Act of 2013 moment in Kenya's regulatory landscape. And this act, some who still refer to themselves as NGOs, replaced the NGO Coordination Act of 1990 and bringing forth a more transparent and efficient framework for the PBO registration and oversight. Because following the enactment, we have embarked now, and I've said last week, and if you bothered to follow us and been monitoring what we're doing, is that we've already started drafting the harmonization of the draft regulations, and the appointment process for the PBO Dispute Tribunal through the judiciary is ongoing. As a matter of fact, for some friends who are here, and I told them I had inquired from the judiciary where that process is, they've told me it's nearly complete and it's actually in Parliament. So anytime now, the tribunal will be out, which will be dealing with specifically with NPO sector. And because you are here on a lighter note, I know you love running to court. You will not be running to any other kind of court. There will be a tribunal for all of us. That's on a light. So the authority staff and the board have undergone extensive training to effectively manage the expanded mandate under Section 42 of the Act. So currently our focus includes finalizing the regulations so that we create a robust operational frameworks for registration and compliance, and ensuring a seamless transition for the BPOs to align with the new legal framework. Recognizing the need for adequate time to adjust, our Cabinet Secretary, Honorable Murkomen for Interior and National Administration, extended the transition period for compliance by a year. I know there was a lot of anxiety last week when we were having the conversation, and I had mentioned that the period we had been granted 12 more months so that we are able to complete the regulations, and all of us will be able to participate. And I'm sure that some of you saw that Kenya Gazette which came out on Friday, last Friday, and it provided that now we have an extension from 14th of May to next year, which is pretty good time for us to be able to finish the regulation. We'll do the public participation with no hurry. Just to mention that we have adjusted our dates. So we will be having the launch of the regulations on 5th of June. 5th of June. So you can block that day. It will be here in Nairobi. Then we will follow that. We'll have another 14 days. You will have the document. SDG group has have been gracious enough that they will open for us an open source portal where we will put that document so that all of us will be able to access it. Then we will begin the public participation across entire 47 counties, which we've clustered into 14 clusters, and we'll be bringing forth a legal framework that enhances the autonomy, accountability, and Kenya. It brings with it critical benefits. Some of you know the tax exemptions for registration, compliance, and capacity building. Additionally, which will serve as a unifying body to promote sector-wide self-regulation and representation. How you will go about that self-regulation aspect, I do not know. Maybe Churchill sometime will really expound to us of self-regulation. And these provisions aim to create a more enabling environment for the civil society to thrive. I know Federation of the BPOs, the election of the office bearers as IEPC. So don't come to my office and tell me that we have elected ourselves. When you bring me your list, please, you will bring me the list from the IEBC. Maybe what I will do, and I was telling some people, maybe what I will only do, I will provide a register for BPOs and the officials, because there are even people who are masquerading to be the National Federation and that they are even members of NPOs when they are not even registered BPOs. I'm the one who will be having the register for the BPOs, isn't it? As the regulator. So when you come, you'll be telling me I'm a registered BPO, and you know we have very many other regimes. And so we acknowledge our mandate to uphold transparency and accountability. However, even with the strides we've made, and this is sad for me, the reality is the 9 NGOs filed their annual returns during the 2022-2023 financial year. This stark figure highlights a pressing compliance gap that cannot be ignored. And shortfall, but a deeper disconnect between regulation and reality.
in financing. Civic societies are not the risk, but are at the risk of being used. Defines the relationship between regulators and the regulated, shifting it from one of accountability. As they to co-developing simplified, user-friendly compliance guidelines and toolkits with the civil societies. And I will always say it. You will find civil societies doing the same thing in the same place, same beneficiaries everywhere, and everyone. And I said, and I will continue saying this, civil societies also have to walk the talk. When you demand for accountability and transparency from government, so are you. Because you cannot have your cake and eat it. So we commit to bring present across the, we commit to being present across the country, physically and digitally, because the sector is national, and so must our presence be. We commit to translating the insights from Talk to Your Regulator today into real, actionable policy reform. Above all, we commit to protecting the civic space. In conclusion, I borrow from a Kenyan proverb that says, and I quote, "When the roots are deep, there is no reason to fear the wind." Of trust, transparency, and cooperation, and we choose engagement of our policy. Let us ensure this initiative is not a one-time event, but a lasting pillar of our national regulatory culture. And above all, let us make trust the new currency of governance. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Asanteni sana.
Asante DG. On this side of the world, if there are night runners, there are few. And so we will walk the talk. For those who came later after the initial introductions, we want to event. We've had the organizers of the event speak to us, and therefore, and we have also heard from the regulators or duty bearers. We now want to have a forum here. As they organize, the government has confirmed that is the government. The Director General has said we are on the grey list. We have to work hard to get out of that grey list. Kudos for the fact that there are progress in this tribunal, and the date for the launch of the regulator 25. Thank you so much for those ones. He has spoken a lot about the benefits that the PBO Act gives or provides to us in our sector, and he's also spoken to the for us to open our eyes on the fact around self-regulation. Asante sana, Director General. At this moment, I want to call upon my brother, Mr. Kimani Brian, to take up so that we have a conversation. Karibu.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good. My name is Kimari. I work for the Center for Human Rights and Policy Studies, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the NPO working group on the FATF. So this session now, first I'll start by really appreciating the people who've spoken before us, including the regulators, the oversight bodies, and the security actors in the room. I think we've set up a great, we've set up for a great session, and we've already introduced some of what we'll be discussing. This next panel discussion will now go very deeply into some of the questions that we already have around the regulations, around anti-money laundering processes, and around illicit financial flows. We're going to talk about the status of Kenya now, with where we are at on the grey list. And beyond that, we're going to look at the consequences of anti-money laundering and countering financing of terrorism laws and regulations, and how these have impacted civil society. But beyond that, we are going to look towards positive transformation. I think the idea, as I like something that Dr. Laxmana has just spoken, and I'll come to you to trademark it. But there's an idea for engagement over suspicion, learning over lecturing, and I think that's really what we should try to get at with this. We are trying to look at how to innovate to address some of these issues as well. So I'll begin by introducing my panelists now. And the first panelist will be Mr. Suba Churchill. I think he's very well known to the people in this room. He's the current executive director of the Kenya National Civil Society Center, and the immediate former presiding convener of the Civil Society Reference Group, which, as you know, is a group that spearheaded the development of the PBO Act, along with as well as PIBORA and the rest of the organizations that they represented. He has extensive knowledge on issues of human rights, gender, devolution, and anti-money laundering, and has wide experience in lobbying, advocacy, training, and providing technical support. I think one of his, as well, governance and decision-making processes that he's been involved in include the constitution-making process in Kenya from quite a while ago. Karibu, Mr. Suba. Good. Asante. Next will be Ms. Hilda Achiro. She's the Chief of Programs and Administration at the Civic Advisory Hub. She's an experienced program manager who has worked within civil society globally and in penal institutions. Her expertise spans a wide range of areas, including civic space, human rights, democracy, rule of law, life skills, health, and education. Thank you so much, Ms. Hilda. I think you know us, along with Yona. Thank you. Along with Yona, Ms. Hilda has been one of the people who spearheaded the Talk to Your Regulator initiative around East Africa, so we'll hear a bit around that. Next, we'll have Mr. Ernest Nyimai. Mr. Ernest Nyimai is the Executive Director of the National Association of NGOs, which is based in Harare, Zimbabwe. His work centers on empowering marginalized communities and amplifying their voices. As the National Association of NGOs, he works closely with NPOs and regulatory agencies to foster transformative change and create a lasting impact. Thank you, Mr. Nyimai. And finally, we'll have Ms. Irene Boke. She's an advisor at the GIZ under the program on combating illicit financial flows. She's also an advocate of the High Court and an expert of issues of governance, human rights, and economic justice. Good, thank you so much. And finally, I'll introduce myself again, because I have the opportunity and the microphone. So as I said, my name is Kimari. I'm the co-convener of the NPO working group, and it's good to have you here. So just framing the conversation has been a lot of issues around the grey list in Kenya and around issues of illicit financial flows. Okay, thank you. Yeah, and around issues of illicit financial flows. And one of the people on the panel is really an expert on this issue, as I mentioned. So as an expert on issues of international financial flows, Irene, what would you say is the effect of Kenya being grey listed as we currently are?
Okay, thank you, Brian. My name is Boke. I work at GIZ. We are running a program that looks at enhancing good governance in Kenya, and part of the work area we are looking at is combating illicit financial flows. I will just speak from where Dr. Kipto left in his keynote speech. Yeah, he said about the tough questions that he could not answer from the joint group in Dar es Salaam. And that is exactly it, yeah? So when you're grey listed as a country, then you fall on a lot of disadvantage. First, your reputational damage. Look at Kenya, yeah? We are a trade center, we are a financial center, we connect a lot of countries in Eastern and Southern Africa. And the fact that we are grey listed, I think already has a very, very bad name. We have a bad name across Africa, not only Africa, but also across the world. So like Dr. Kipto said, we need to really work to be able to address some of the challenges. It's not only the reputation, but I'll also draw you to the financial sector, particularly the private sector. Yeah, I always give an example of a $100 bill. So I want to send a $100 bill to my aunt in the UK. The money I give to the bank, the $100 bill that I will give to the bank here, is not the same one that she's going to receive in the UK. So there should be some trust between the financial institution in Kenya and in the UK to say that, okay, we will give this money in lieu that we will get the clean bill from Kenya. So the Standard Chartered in UK will give her the $100 bill, a $100 bill, with the expectation that the $100 bill I sent from Kenya is going to clear. If that does not work, what does it speak to the correspondent banking relationship between Standard Chartered Kenya or Standard Chartered anywhere else or any other banking sector? Yeah? So we fall a lot of that, and that will mean that the institution then will have to do several or deeper due diligence to be sure that this bill that I give is clean and is going to pass through the financial system. Yeah? So the fact that the financial sector connects the world as one entity or one institution or a village, then if you are grey listed, there are doubts. Yeah, it's no longer a full line, but a dotted line. Yeah, so those are some of the challenges that we face. But of course, issues of foreign direct investments. Right now, we are seeing a lot of investment running out of Kenya. There is no trust really, even in the from people who are trying to invest in countries. Yeah. There's only one very strange case I saw in UAE where they were grey listed and the FDI actually rose. Their foreign direct investment rose, which is an interesting one. They need to tell us how they did it. But that was one of the few very rare cases, actually. I've never heard of any. Yeah? So I think those are some of the effects that we suffer. And GSZ, we have put in place mechanisms, so we are putting in place programs that will be able to support Kenya, not only now, but we started working in Kenya on issues of illicit financial flows in 2015, and we've been supporting government agencies across. And some of the areas that we look at, not only the legislative and regulatory framework, but also the supervisory monitoring framework that the PBORA is right now putting in place. For example, we are also looking at law enforcement agencies. I'm glad that the law enforcement teams are in the house, Interpol, DCI, and the rest. We are also looking how do we support those agencies such that when the Daktari here is asked, how many cases have you investigated on terrorism financing or money laundering, they have a number. How many cases have you prosecuted? Then we also work with ODPP to ensure that we raise prosecution issues on especially money laundering cases. So those are some of the initiatives that we are putting in place, but also GSZ is a capacity building entity, so we try to really build the capacity of these agencies on several matters. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for that. And I've gotten a great example with the $100 bill, which is an easy way to explain something that's quite complex, and that makes it really clear. Now moving to Suba next, and really just jumping off from where Irene has left off. We know that when institutions are grey listed, there's a lot of damage to the reputation of the country, to the financial systems. And Kenya has been grey listed before. We were grey listed in 2011. And at that point, some of the issues that we saw within the regulation of civil society were thought to be related to Kenya being grey listed. So I know especially from around 2014, there were a lot of issues in the civil society sector in Kenya, and some of it was informed by AML and CFT measures in the country. Drawing from your own experience, what do you think have been the intended and unintended consequences of these frameworks that we've adapted to address money laundering and financing of terrorism, especially touching on the impact on civic space in Kenya and on the work of NPOs?
Thank you very much. As you've heard, I'm sober directly. Starting with the intended consequences, of course, one can say that we have seen, as a result of this anti-money laundering and countering of financing of terrorism measures that our government has adopted over the years, we can talk about, strengthened financial systems and prevention of illicit financial view, and of course the challenge of going into the blacklist. But we can also, talk about more robust financial systems. We have seen our banking sector, for example, insurance and many other financial institutions, grow. Kenya is one of the countries that not only hosts homegrown banks, but also international banks. And our banks have grown across the region. We know, for example, that Equity is in almost in each of the current East African Community partner states, save perhaps for Somalia and a few others that came on board more recently. But we can also talk about, other than reduced illicit financial flows, we can also, as a country, talk about enhanced security nationally. We have not seen, as a result of those measures, cases of terrorist attacks. And that is because perhaps those terrorist cells that used to thrive on less regulation, those measures have contributed to curbing some of their machinations, and therefore we can talk about being relatively free. I think the other day I was walking into a restaurant, and so a security guard who is supposed to frisk me and ensure that I'm not a possible terrorist was the one who was welcoming me into the hotel. He has become, most of them have become stewards, shop stewards, and that is literally dropping our guard as a country. And of course, there are people out there who will be looking for opportunity to take advantage of that. You recall during the days of the late Otieno Kajwang, when at some point the immediate former Prime Minister Raila Odinga came back from the country, and there was this big rally, and then they were saying, "Baba, while you are away, every day bomb." So today we can no longer, even if Otieno was still alive, talk about those bomb that were occurring almost on a daily basis. Now, more significantly, and of great interest to the sector, should be the unintended consequences, because all these intended consequences are generally positive and contribute towards creating an enabling environment for the sector. Now, one of the unintended consequences, which should be obvious to us, including Muhuri, is the restriction on NPO activities. We have seen, measures that contribute to what one may call over-regulation. I know previous speakers, including the Director General, have been talking about regulation, but there's a feeling in the sector that we are being over-regulated. And I'll give you a typical example. If you look at the Prevention of Terrorism Act, there's a mechanism created there that has to clear organizations that want to do sensitization on anti-terrorism, and that is over-regulation, because then you have to seek clearance from such organizations. And more recently, the Kenya National Civil Society Center to issue a statement condemning the National Cohesion and Integration Commission for proposing a bill in Parliament that would empower them to be a referee on peace-building activities by NPOs. And we told them that, we have our key regulator. Each of the NPOs in this country are regulated either by the authority, the register of societies, register of companies for those for not-profit companies, and so on. And therefore, the Cohesion Commission cannot, cover up its spectacular failure to deliver on its mandate by demanding more powers to be the one superintending over peace-building activities, which a number of NPOs do, especially in marginalized areas where people still fight a lot around conflict, resources, including grazing land and so on. Then there has been financial inclusion. As banks, try to ensure, and I like the example that our sister gave, Boke, as banks try to ensure that there is no illicit financial flows, they have adopted measures that are generally referred to as de-risking. You are trying to eliminate risk of facilitating illicit financial flows. And so there's a lot of due diligence procedures that banks engage in. If you wanted to open an account, if you are an NPO, the Director General here will say, I must give you a letter. And that letter comes with a fee. And so it not even has, financial exclusion measures, but also increasing the cost of operation for NPOs in order to ensure that they are compliant. And many of those that have bank accounts across the country will tell you that at some point some former executive directors, it was called then, of the NGO Coordination Board did a letter to all banks saying that before any civil society, before any NGO opens a bank account, they must get clearance from us. You and I know that not all NPOs are regulated by the NGO Coordination Board as it was then, but banks became very cautious, and so they would refer people to the NGO Coordination Board, including even those that are not registered under the regulatory framework. Then there has been erosion of civic space, which means that whenever organizations cannot raise even the funding they need to do the activities and deliver on their mandate, a number of donors today issue funding declaration forms and a kind of an affidavit that you swear, and perhaps the regulators like the PB authority may not be aware of this, but a number of donors when they are funding you today, would have certain clauses on anti-money laundering and financing of terrorism, and they want to be assured that that those funds will not be used for any other purpose other than those for which they have been asked. And of course, I've alluded to increased compliance costs. That in fact, as we implement the PBO Act, looking at some of the ethical aspirations and standards set out in Section 27, they need to be, internal integrity. Organizations will have to assure internal integrity before they are, even file reports with the regulator, and that would mean additional staff, additional costs, and therefore, those are some of the unintended consequences of some of these measures. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Suba, for really putting it well and clarifying those issues. He's touched on issues of de-risking, issues of due diligence and compliance requirements by donor actors as well as the overburdening of NGOs with different regulations that they have to now also ascribe to and perform. Moving to Ernest, we've touched on some of the issues in Kenya, and just to tell you, within the context of Kenya, despite non-profit organizations being treated with suspicion, there have been, for instance, 70 reports of suspicious transactions from different agencies on NPOs in Kenya, but 0 of them have had a finding or a conclusion that puts NPOs in a negative light. So I wanted to move to the context of Southern Africa and also Zimbabwe, where you come from, and check on what have been the unintended consequences of some of these AML measures and how have they affected civil society actors within Southern Africa. And if you could also share from the perspective of Southern Africa what some of the NPOs working there have been doing to change the situation.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Let me also observe the protocols, and let me also start off by thanking the organizers, for extending an invitation for me to be part of this important conversation around issues of, ensuring that there is a CSO enabling environment, but also we comply to different, laws and different regulatory requirements. I think, let me congratulate you for taking this, initiative or milestone, which we have tried in our context in Zimbabwe, after having, a series of conversations and engagements prior to the official launch of the Talk to Your Regulator. And we have started to see
how the Talk to Your Regulator can actually transform the sector and change the narrative, especially in terms of removing the boundary that often exist between the regulators and the sector. I think this initiative that you are taking on board today is really transformational in terms of ensuring that we remove that boundary that normally exists. In terms of the unintended consequences, in terms of anti-money laundering and countering of terrorism financing, in Southern Africa we have seen a trend where there is, from the NPO sector's perspective, misapplication of the FATF recommendation 8, which I believe most of us were aware. It's a very noble recommendation in my view, as it seeks to ensure that we mitigate against the potential abuse of the NPO sector by terrorist organizations, but also by terrorist financiers. But as it may be good as is, I think one of the challenges that we have faced so far is the misapplication of the recommendation itself. I think the recommendation itself speaks a lot, or emphasizes about issues of applying the risk-based approach and also coming up with proportionate measures to the identified risk. But what we have seen in Southern Africa, and in particular in Zimbabwe, has been one, we feel like the recommendation has been used as a green card to really introduce new laws and also even administrative and at operational level requirements for the sector, which are burdensome. And if you look at Zambia right now, they have a looming NGO bill. In my country, it has already been passed into law, and it was under the guise of ensuring that as a country we comply with FATF recommendation 8. But you would find that the recommendation itself is very clear. For instance, there is a clear definition of the NPOs which are supposed to be monitored, or which are supposed to satisfy the requirements. But what we have seen is that the countries actually universally apply the recommendation to assume that all NPOs in the country is actually vulnerable, they are at risk, and then come up with measures such as amending the existing regulatory laws and frameworks in the country. And that has been one of the unintended consequences. And we also admit that even globally, that has been one of the unintended consequences, which probably led to the revision of the recommendation itself and more emphasis on the need for us to apply the risk-based approach. We have also seen securitization of anti-money laundering and countering of terrorism financing measures, where you would actually find that the duty bearers, I want to avoid the word regulators because it might be subject to interpretation, but the duty bearers, those that have got a responsibility to really ensure that we comply, they look at anti-money laundering issues as security issues, right? And yet, from where we come from as civil society, we believe in human rights based approach, and there has been some trends of violation of the human rights aspects and principles in the manner in which we are actually complying with the FATF recommendation. And I think this has been having a chilling effect in terms of ensuring that there is an enabling operating environment for the sector. But what is also evident is what Yona normally tend to term it, grey listing induced panic, where sometimes when a country is grey listed, the speed, the agents to come up with the measures, and sometimes there are very low or even non-consultations that are happening to try and ensure that there is inter-agency consultation, and we try to work together towards addressing the issues. So it's something that we have also seen in our country, where a lot of measures have started to be introduced, and mainly those new requirements. So that's another thing that we have also been witnessing. But I think the other challenge is around the sensitivity of the subject matter itself. You see, when we talk about anti-money laundering, terrorism financing, I think there is a lot of sensitivities to the extent that I'll give you an example. In my country, it's really a security issue to the extent that there is a national task force on anti-money laundering and countering of terrorism financing. But the duty bearers or the regulators have been hesitant to even expand the membership of that working group to even include NPOs, because they feel like it's some
something that is sensitive, private, and it's confidential, you don't need just to include everyone. There are also issues to do with information disclosure that is attached to it. So the issue of sensitivities again has been one of the issues. But also just to say, as NPO sector, we've been lagging behind in terms of appreciating the AML CFT architecture itself, and for that reason we have been also affected in a way, because sometimes opportunities are there for us to engage, opportunities are there for us to come up with our own mitigatory measures, but because ourselves we don't understand some of these things, I think that has been one of the challenges as it pertains the sector itself. But I'm glad that through the initiative like the Talk to Your Regular, like I said, it's really a transformational initiative in terms of trying to bridge those gaps, so that even as we engage with the regulators, we are all coming from the same level of understanding in terms of what we are required to do. When we started conversation in my country around the AML CFT, the sector was always blaming the regulators to say, you are accusing us of being terrorists. But that was not the point. It was because perhaps we were not appreciating that they have FATF recommendations, and I think the country has gone through a series of mutual evaluations and national risk assessments, but we have been not participating effectively from an ignorant. The opportunities were there, but we were really looking at it as a foreign language when it comes to the work that we do. So just quickly to touch on a few things that I think can work in terms of what I have seen colleagues are doing. We really need to start off by bridging the knowledge gap. And I think we want to appreciate the technical support that we have continued to receive, especially from partners like Civic Advisor Hub, Defenders Protection Initiative. We started this partnership in April 2023, where it started off with a sector-wide sensitization process, which has been revolutionary in terms of changing the narrative and our understanding around the AML CFT issue. So I would really think it's something that we need to think closely as a sector. We need to understand the different dynamics, the trends around AML CFT. Then also issues of promoting inter-agents, dialogue, which I think the Talk to Your Regulator seeks to achieve. That's why it actually goes beyond institutions that may be classified as regulators, because we need to talk to each other. We need to co-create solutions. We need to co-create even policies that can help us address some of this. And lastly is to invest in sector-wide systems. It's always good for us to also do something, especially in terms of coming up with mitigation measures which will help us to safeguard our operating environment, and to demonstrate even to the regulators that even from our end we know the responsibilities and the expectations, and we are doing something about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope you could all see the similarities and the subtle differences in the context of Eastern and Southern Africa. Moving on to Hilda. Uganda and Kenya have recently changed the anti-money laundering legislation, and part of the change includes delisting the NGO regulator as a supervising body under the anti-money laundering law. What does this mean for NPOs? And what changes should we anticipate in Kenya, Uganda having done it a few months ahead of us?
Thank you very much, Brian. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings from Uganda. So when we talk about delisting, this has been a journey of about more than 3 years that we've all been talking about the misapplication of Recommendation 8. Recommendation 8 advises governments to list the NGOs that fall under the definition of NPOs, and then assess their risk to terrorism financing, and then apply the proportionate and risk-based approach in supervising them. And it's something, when we look at that, it doesn't say anything about NGOs being accountable persons. And that's the case we had in Uganda. The NGOs were accountable persons with the Anti-Money Laundering Act. And this is something that we thought, and looking at the recommendation, we're like, this is not appropriate. NGOs need to be delisted, because then we are being put on the same levels with casinos, with the law firms, with the banks, and we are charity organizations. So through research, we conducted the research on the impact of anti-money laundering and terrorism financing laws on civic space in Uganda. And from the research, we extracted a policy brief on the need to delist NPOs from the list of accountable persons that was then shared with the Financial Intelligence Authority, SMLAG, and other international bodies. And closed door meetings also happened with the national, regional, and international bodies on this issue. And on January, it was a success. Good news for NGOs in Uganda. Parliament approved, when it was tabled in Parliament, Parliament approved that NGOs can be delisted from the list of accountable persons. And knowing our history, that usually when we're moving towards elections, NGOs are usually towards elections or a contentious bill in Parliament. The vocal NGOs, there's always one who will be a culprit, whose accounts will be frozen on grounds of financing terrorism or facilitating money laundering within the country. So the timing was right because our elections will be held next year in January. So it was a success for us. And this came also collective efforts. We've worked hand in hand with working group on FATIF, which is a group of about 12 that can use diplomacy to negotiate with the state. If an NGO has been closed off, how best can we interact with the Financial Intelligence Authority, with the NGO Bureau, and we sort out the issue, the matter at hand. But also, at the same time, it also saves finances for the state, because right now they're only going to they're going to apply the risk-based approach, and they're only going to look at the NGOs that are high risk. So that means less work and less finances on supervising NGOs. And that also means that as NGOs, we look at our internal structures, our internal policies on handling money laundering and terrorism financing, so that we are not culprits. So the mere fact that we've been delisted, the mere fact that we are off the grey list, we've talked about Kenya, the mere fact that we are off the grey list, we've talked about Kenya being back on the grey list for the second time. Uganda will be undergoing the mutual evaluation, I think, in 2027 or 2028. So how best can we protect this sector? And we are not the sector that pulls back the country onto the FATF grey list. About the Kenya, the amendment of the law in Kenya. I know Kenya now is also on that road. They want to get off the grey list, and we understand. In Uganda, we implemented, there's a time in Parliament they tabled like 6 laws at once without consultation, but because we needed to get off the grey list, and it impacted us badly. For example, when we talk about beneficial ownership, this was something that was amended with the Companies Act. This was something that was immediately implemented, and then the banks started requesting for beneficial owners from every NGO, or else they freeze your account or you don't open a bank account. The regulators themselves also some of them didn't know how to go about the law. Who are the beneficial owners? Who do we put on this list? The NGOs themselves also were stuck. But at the same time, we need to provide a list to the bank for the continuity of work. Because we know very well, recommendation 8 also, much as the NGOs that fall under that definition, a risk-based approach must be applied and do not disrupt the work of legitimate NGOs. And here, the work was being disrupted. Work has to come to a standstill because of some of these laws that are implemented. So I understand what Kenya is going through. And reading bits of the law from the internet, what has been amended, I get a feeling that the NGO sector is going to get more scrutiny moving forward. What does that looks like? In Africa, usually our challenges are interconnected. It's bits of borrowing from other countries, what other countries have done. You might go through them. We will get NGOs' banks account being frozen, allegations like before. And then there's bit of, yes, the law talks about improved transparency on funding. What does that mean like? Some of these block things, the block sentences put in these policies and law can easily be misapplied and misinterpreted, and it can apply when it suits the other person. So what does that mean? So that's where we are. But also, we've talked about the knowledge gap. We appreciate the laws of AML and CFT, And as members of the civil society, we need to bridge the knowledge gap within Kenya. That's what means for NPOs in Kenya. We need to, just like Uganda, strengthen our internal systems, get to do more due diligence. How well do we know our donors? How well do we know where this funding is coming from? How well do we know the origin of this money? How well do we know the people that are sanctioned? Are we getting money from them? And in the new law of Kenya, there's that element of sanctioning NGOs that do not follow some of these things. So that's the risk that NGOs face. So for us not to get on the risk of being sanctioned and pausing our work, I think we need to work as a collective. We need to create more awareness, create simple information on AML and CFT, on the new law, and then also talk to our regulators. How best can we connect with PBRO, because it's going to be the oversight body. The law mandates it to be the oversight body on monitoring NGOs. At least it's not Financial Intelligence Authority like Uganda was. We had to report to Financial Intelligence Authority as well as report to the NGO Bureau. So how well are we communicating with the PBO? I've heard the police agencies saying they're not regulators, but they are regulators, much as the enforcers. They are regulators. How best are we communicating? How best are we talking to them so that we sort out some of these issues? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. As you can see, I have a wonderful panel that's very informed and that really speaks to some of the issues that are on the forefront of the agenda of the working group. And also for additional information, and as we try to close the knowledge gap, there's a handout in front of your desk that explains some of the objectives of the working group. And this includes really to push for some of this conversation and to take strategic and very swift action to prevent from this policy panic that sometimes comes with countries being grey listed. So we appreciate that very much, and we've heard about some of what have been the negative consequences in different countries. And as we move to Irene shortly, I'll note that there have also been quite a few positive developments in the last few years, especially in our sector. And some of these include the PBO Act that was operationalized, as well as some of the amendments in the anti-money laundering law, and different changes in the sector that I know GIZ has been a part of, including the sectoral assessment. Reflecting on some of these developments, some of these positive developments, what do you think are some of the key gaps that regulators and financial
will be there? Once we are out, we tuck our boots and say, okay, we are done. Yeah, I think for the first time, consciously remember the 2011 grey listing. And for capacity gap, I look at it from both the regulator and the regulatees. So for the regulators, yeah, we need to know even who is under our purview. I keep DG here on who is really under the purview of the PBRA. Yeah? We need to know who are we regulating for us to say yes, we are effectively touching all the corners of the people that we need to supervise. You regulating institution A from institution B. So that capacity knowledge capacity has a big gap that needs to be bridged both at to be able to know what to put in to be able to know what to put in place. The other thing, and I will really challenge all the NPOs in the room today. FATF will really challenge all the NPOs in the room today. FATF methodology are public documents. Do we even know what our Master Wanjala here would have, or do we even know what our Master Wanjala here would have, or will let us know about our capacity? But do we even take the initiative to know what the capacity? But do we even take the initiative to know what the
and also just to acknowledge that there's a lot of people on the online platform. Thank you for joining us, every founder of the NPO working group as well. What do you think? The regular engagement with regulators, between regulators and NPOs, becomes quite important and essential to dismantle the mistrust and build confidence, to really respond to some of the issues that the speakers today have addressed. What would you say, what efforts have you taken to ensure continuous engagement with regulators in the past? And what are some of the milestones that you think NPOs have had in some of this engagement that can help in addressing AML CFT issues?
Yeah, thank you very much. As people have been fronting the sensitization and socialization of the Financial Action Task Force and its processes, we have, particularly from 2020, when we initiated the process of what we were calling then National NPOs Working Group on FATF, we did a lot of outreach with a lot of support from the Fund for Global Human Rights. I remember partnering with the NGO Coordination Board, as it was called then, and the immediate former Executive Director, Andrew Ogombe, was very, very instrumental in enlightening our stakeholders on what, as then a reporting agency, they expected the sector to do. Muhuri was very instrumental, Ujama Center and so on. And we did a number of, virtual, remember that was the time when, COVID had happened, and there were these restrictions on freedom of assembly and association. But we were still able to organize a number of virtual sessions, of course with the challenges that come with the virtual vikao. We could see some of our participants, preparing their lunches as they also listened to the conversations that happened. But we took it in our stride and said, these are realities of life. And we reached out to almost 2,000 plus different stakeholders. We parceled the country into regions, so we had Lower Eastern, Upper Eastern, Nairobi and its neighboring counties like Kiambu and so on. We had Western, Nyanza and so on, and we were able to do quite a number of sensitization sessions. In most cases, we reached out to the same groups almost twice or three times for the better part of 2020 and 2021. In 2021, we had developed such capacity that we were able to come up with a shadow report on Kenya's Mutual Evaluation Review, which we shared with the different stakeholders. My organization and Muhuri and many others here are members of the Global NPO Coalition on FATF, and we have attended a number of those international engagements in Germany. GIZ campus in Bonn was my last station last year, when we were reviewing some of the best practices that later on informed the review of recommendation 8 and how best recommendation 1, and in particular risk-based approach, should be implemented by countries. Last year we partnered, and this should be for the benefit of the Director General, who is of course relatively new, and working with Bernadette there, and Somi, I saw him there. We did a sector risk-based assessment for Kenya, NPO sector in Kenya. And so if Director General, you are being asked questions, you are now clearer in terms of that report, which was actually launched by the PS for Interior, Raymond Omolo. You need to look for that report. It's very good because for the first time we had a sector-based, risk-based approach that pinpoints at those NPO sectors that are at risk. And in terms of Kenya, I think 4 categories of NPOs came to the fore within the definition of NPOs as outlined in by FATF. We have the NGOs that are today called PBOs. We also have CBOs that are now regulated under the Community Groups Registration Act. We have, companies limited by guarantee, and of course societies. But one gap in that report is the failure and reluctance by the religious sector to come on board, because we were even ready to do a focus group discussion with them. But part of our country is that there are segments of society that believe that they are holier than thou himself, or at some point he will be doing it again. We love to include them and make sure we include them. But increasingly, something happens. So when, something happened in Nyanza, then the sector. So there is a way in which populism is undermining. Efforts to get Kenya back out of the grey list, and politicians need to get this message very clearly. Yes, we know, Kenya is predominantly Christian, but we cannot continue to treat such a critical sector with velvet gloves at a time when they're enough, and stamp our feet and look, we must, get this sector in order. And I'm seeing the same, of course, spreading. Back to your question, I think, one of the risk assessment for the sector, and I remember our colleague from Southern Laundering and Finance kept some people off. Some people never, they would tell you, they told our interviewers, don't call me again, because they think you are investigating them. And I think this stems from the fact that as a country, we have oversensitized, over-romanticized, and over-securitized this discussion to a point where people are scared. And of course, we know what governments do, especially whenever there's a terrorism act, the tendency to overreact, to be seen to be doing something that ends up, deviating from the path that has been set out by under Recommendation 8 and Recommendation 1 of those, 40 FATF recommendations. So I think those are the milestones that we have been able to achieve. We were able actually at that time in those conversations occasionally to get, I've already pointed out to the immediate former deputy director at the NGO coordination board as it was then, being part of us, we were able to get, the financial reporting center people coming on board. Some of them were a bit hesitant to sit with us in the same room, but they participated virtually, and I think that for me, moving forward, was the beginning of this conversation that we are carrying forward today.
Thank you so much for that. And you've touched on some of those engagements with the regulators, and really what this Talk to Your Regulator series is trying to do is make that a more consistent engagement and a more meaningful dialogue that, as Dr. Laxmana said, it's about learning and less about each sector regulating, lecturing each other. And we have to really acknowledge the work that Civic Advisory Hub has done on this Talk to Your Regulator initiative already. And Hilda, as we talk about the T2R, what are some of the engagements that you've had under this initiative in Uganda? And how do you say this initiative has been useful, particularly for regulators and NPOs in Uganda?
Thank you, Brian. So before I dive into the engagements that we've had, I would like to give you a brief about how this idea was conceived. In August 2021, we woke up to news that 54 organizations had been suspended by the NGO Bureau, the overall regulatory body for the NPOs in Uganda. And among the NGOs that had been suspended, it had NGOs that had registered with the NGO Bureau. It had companies limited by guarantee that have only registered with the Uganda Registration Service Bureau. It had community-based organizations that are supposed to operate on a sub-county level that had only registered with the district. So, and of course, different organizations came up to see how can we support the 54. But then we found a gap when we sat as a team then at the Defenders Protection Initiative. When we sat as a team and we started analyzing the context within which we were operating, that was just fresh from elections. So we realized that, okay, everyone is trying to step in. Some are going to court, some are issuing out statements in public, some are demanding for these organizations to lift up the suspicion. But then we realized that there was a gap, there was a missing link, there was a bridge that was not there. The CSOs were talking to ourselves and we are coming up with mitigation measures amongst ourselves. The regulators were also talking to themselves and also acting without knowing what we are going through. So that's when we conceived this idea: how best can NGOs and the regulators connect? How best can NGOs and regulators meet and just talk? But then we made it an NGO-led dialogue space. It is us who define the agenda, but there's mutual respect, professionalism, and we are very civil in the discussions. So that's how we birthed Talk to Your Regulator, then a Defenders Protection Initiative. And mainly with the goal of broadening the spaces for dialogue for NPOs and their regulators to facilitate a safer working environment for the civil society organizations. So we came up with different engagements. We do what we call open and closed door engagements. The open Talk to Your Regulator engagements, they can take a shape of in-person, virtual, or hybrid, where we call a regulator or regulators in a room if it's in person, and it's just an open dialogue. We get to know about our compliance obligations as NGOs. We get to share the challenges we're facing as members of the civil society with the regulators, and the regulators also get to share with us the challenges they face with us as a sector. So both parties then get to clean the houses. Some of the challenges, the solutions are got there and then. Some of them is long term. But also the beauty with that is that there was a knowledge gap amongst in our compliance obligations. In Uganda, NGOs comply like with over 10 regulators. Some of them it might be minor, just getting a letter of reference and reporting on an annual basis, but that needs resources. So when we got that, so people at least got to know about the compliance obligations, and then also it enlightened us on areas of advocacy. We advocate from an informed view. And then where the closed door engagement came in, it came in the areas of my brothers and sisters who are saying they're not regulators. The security. The security has a lot to say on our operational environment. But then the security might not be open enough to come and talk about it with everyone in the room. So then we pick few NGO leaders and security, that is the ISO, the district information, security officers, the army, the police, and then we sit in a closed door meeting where we also share openly. So the beauty with sharing that openly is that then the NGOs know what to use the information for. Whatever comes out of that meeting, you sit and you know, you're like, okay, we need to advocate for this, we need to change this, we need to write a letter to so-and-so, we need to knock on this office. And that has helped a lot, because there was a misunderstanding between the two, because the security probably will tell you, why don't you want to share your budgets with us? And then we're also saying, you're overstepping your boundaries. Why do you want to know our budget? But then the security is saying, how are you going to complement the nation's budget? How are you going to complement the activities for the nation if we don't know what you have in your budget and your work plan? So it's just about harmonizing some of the differences. And then another engagement format is the regional bit of it. So I've had Dr. talk about how PBRO is going to launch the law and then go into 14 regions. So it could be something that we could adopt the same regions. In Uganda, we also had about 14 regions that we went into with several regulators, and simply because in those regions we have community-based organizations that might not afford to come to Kampala. In those regions we have companies limited by guarantee that are operating on a very small scale and a minimal budget that might not afford to access the office of the regulator. So we went into those regions, took the regulator, did both open and closed door engagements, collected the challenges, the ones, especially the ones that needed to be acted on a higher level, and then we crowned it up with the annual summit. During the annual summit is when we get mainly top management of the regulators, the decision makers of the regulators, who then can look at some of these challenges and commit to addressing them. So the cycle goes on the next year, regional and then crowning up with a summit. So that when we crown up this year with the summit, is again holding the regulators accountable for what they set out to do last year. But also the regulators holding the sector accountable for what the sector set out to do last year. So another arm is getting NGOs and service providers. Which service providers am I talking about? They're not necessarily our regulators. The institutions of public chartered accountants. These are people who have all the list of qualified auditors. And it's mandatory for all NGOs to have their books audited by a qualified, a listed auditor. And it's only that institution that knows the listed auditors. So how best can we have these conversations with them of the funds that are in the market that are coming to pose as auditors and auditing books, and then tomorrow you have fake accounts and the donor can't give you grants. So we looked, and we're also looking into having talk to your donor, because we realize that mismatch. You know, most of our donors are in the global north, and the context in Africa, in the global south, is totally different. So we are getting to look at how can we talk to our donors and also come up with synergies together. Yeah, so that's the different engagements that we took.
Fantastic, thank you. And from this, you can start to anticipate the kind of conversations that we'll be having under the Talk to Your Regulator initiatives. So PIBORA, regulators, NPOs in the room, please anticipate that we'll be knocking on your doors in a couple of years. And the goal is to have a very coordinated response to some of these issues. That's not just a response, but it also anticipates some of the issues that will be there. It's more future looking, more futuristic. But before that, I'm to break the program slightly. Do prepare your questions at the time. Thank you.
Officials, good morning. My name is Bernadette Nzomo. My notice has been very short. I was part of a team tourism financing risk assessment, which we started sometime in November 20. And how we actually envisaged to do the work was to work with the civil society, leading the data collection from the civil society frontier, and then the government side, we were coordinating to get the data from the law enforcement and the other regulators, we call them supervisors. So in a nutshell, what the first step was, first of all, to identify the FATF style non-profit organization, raising and moving funds and things like that. So when you got the definition, is then the time we deployed the questionnaires to assess whether there has been a typology or there has been a case of misuse for terrorism financing in Kenya. And we identified 8 risk factors based on what the non-profit organization gave feedback on and based on the data that was there with the government agencies. And that was part 1 of the exercise, and then we went to part 2 of the exercise, where we were now reviewing the laws within the different registration regime and now checking on the mitigative measures and seeing the adequacy of measures, and now coming up with the residual risk. The first step was to come up with the inherent risk as is, based on the threat that we face in Kenya. And when you look at it, technically for non-profit organization, we oversight and monitor for terrorism financing, just because of how terrorism financing operates and how it manifests. The idea is, how do they raise money, how do they move money, and how is money stored? And when you look at money laundering, you find the idea is to disguise the source of proceeds, and it is purely criminal. And when you look at the non-profit organization outfit and the business outfit, you find as an oversight, really, you will actually be on the lookout to sensitize the sector and to monitor the sector and to oversight the sector for misuse of terrorism financing. The sector needs to know how terrorism organization could raise funds, how we are possibly to be abused, how we are vulnerable for abuse of TF, and how we could actually be used for vehicle to either move a terror, a sympathizer from one end to the other, and how actually to be on the lookout and say, are we somehow indirectly paying protection fee and things like that. So the work of, we had a conversation the other day and said, the nexus between terrorism financing and money laundering is now when now you have proceeds already as a terror organization, and now you have excesses, and now you have to launder the money into formal financial sector. That is the nexus between TF and ML. But technically, when you look at the outfit or non-profit organization, there will be lesser of an ML, not unless it is now going to the legal arrangement. That is the time you will find ML manifesting itself. But rarely on normal occasion or now, and a non-profit organization operates, rarely will you see the manifestation of ML coming to force, but it will always be TF. Ideally, what we want as an authority, and I'm so glad is this conversation whereby it is CSO led, the agenda is laid by the CSO, because you understand yourself better and you will not be sued. But the first thing we have to know is we just want to make sure that the non-profit sectors are not, there is no de-risking. And de-risking is where banks say non-profit organizations are at risk of TF abuse, and now I don't want to deal with them because they're high risk. Or debanking, whereby I used to bank with this organization, but because I perceive them to be high risk, I don't want to be associated with them because it is policy and all that. And then unfair targeting of non-profit organization. As a regulator, we need to go out there and say how many people have read the risk assessment for terrorism financing for non-profit organization in Kenya. And you'll actually see there has not been any case of misuse of a non-profit organization in our jurisdiction. But the risk is here, yes. But how do we make sure that non-profit organizations understand how terrorism financing manifests itself and are aware, and they can actually prevent it from happening? Because the objective, their Financial Action Task Force, the objective for Recommendation 8 is to make sure that we protect, as a regulator and the government, the non-profit organization from misuse for TF. So the idea for us is to protect the sector from misuse of TF. And how best do we protect the sector? By having this kind of conversation and making everybody aware on how TF can manifest from TF. And then also the other aspect, the other key mandate for the authority is now to make sure that you be a non-profit organization. And then the essence for you now to just openly share what programs do you have, what is your budget like, and things like that. And then remember, terrorism financing is not about the amounts of money. Even 10 bob or moving you closer to the conflict zone, I have already supported. So terrorism financing is not about the amounts of money being moved. It's a web, it's a connectivity, and all what the law enforcement and the regulator ought to do is first of all disrupt and deter. That's the bottom line. And then the essence now for us, and I mentioned, when you look at it, the watchdog for ML definitely, because the idea is to disguise my proceeds and put it in the formal financial system to disguise it at proper proceeds. So the watchdog will also be the financial sector and the banks for ML. The watchdog as well for terrorism financing, because it is the intent. Who is better placed to be the watchdog for terrorism financing? It will always be the law enforcement. And then when it comes now to the regulators of the non-profit organization and the civil society and the non-profit organization themselves, our work is to be vigilant, to monitor, to oversight, to make sure we know the new trends, what's happening, what's new matters terrorism financing. I hope I'm still on time. My time is up. So I really appreciate this conversation, and I think we'll have more of these conversations, and then we discuss in depth how we can actually detect, how we can be aware, alert, and try and make sure that bottom line we are disrupting. And the next thing that you're going to do as the authority is to make sure that we carry out a targeted risk-based outreach program, such that we have a targeted material based on the risk profile of the particular non-profit organization. There are some information which are not relevant to some certain organization, and some information that you may need to have in-depth understanding of exactly when I say we are the terror organized group can raise money through this and this XYZ, and they can move the money this way, and as well they can store the money in this way, such that it will be very targeted and it is non-disruptive. I think in a part of our proposal or concept, we had said that the risk-based will be proportionate, risk-based, and non-disruptive measures. So when you mix the three, it will be risk-based, non-disruptive, and proportionate. So for me to know it is proportionate, it means it is in equal measure to the risk of that particular organization. And then it is risk-based, it is what risk is it? Are you in the risk of raising, moving, or storing? Raising, moving, and storing funds will manifest itself, matters TF. And then when I'm saying non-disruptive, if you are carrying out activities in X region, I should monitor is interested for us to demonstrate how whatever initiatives we meet agencies, you will find it the receptive and the implementation will actually work in a very seamless manner. So I appreciate
that has touched on. That's really important to set the agenda both for regulators and for something that might lead to more disruption. Really, that's very much in this room. So it's really around how we can respond to these processes in the first place.
So thank you so much, moderator. This is an interesting conversation, and I was not meant to raise this question, but our authority was very interesting in its nature and is the reality. Suspicion, the roots, and how do we coexist. So the reality is, Kenya is a democratic and libertarian society. And us as CSOs, that is what we care most because of where we've come from. For the last 60 years, there's been efforts to consolidate that culminated into our 2010 constitution, and we would not want to have any room for, let's say, dictatorship or authoritarianism. So this conversation also can lead to the sector being clamped down with an excuse of this is an avenue of money laundering. I can see Ford Foundation is here, and during the Gen Z uprising last year, this is an institution that was mentioned, and 16 of our colleagues were also mentioned and flagged out to be the agents of people who are funding that particular, which was actually misinformation. And there is a fact to that. And I think this can also lead to a hard conversation, that this conversation should not instill fear. I agree with our friend from Uganda, Madam Hilda, that awareness creation in nature, capacity building, dialogue, the conversation be owned by the NPOs themselves, as opposed to having an external motivator of this conversation. Because again, if we challenge ourselves in this room, that how many Kenyans even understand this thing? We don't. I mean, unless now you explain in these simple terms that there's, in fact, a DG, I gave an example of the printer and the organization, which I think you give me an example when I had even problems in understanding this when we were having a conversation with you, that I realized that I could also be an agent of money laundering without knowing. So you can imagine that. That made me have interest in this particular conversation. But again, when I look at my structures where I am and all that policies that we have internally, I say, no, that's not what we are doing. So you see, you approach it from suspicion that why is someone telling me or labeling me to be an agent of money laundering and all these particular things. So allow me conclude by asking the authority that with this implementation of the Public Benefits Authority Act, Organizations Authority Act 2013, there is a timely conversation that is beginning. And self-regulation is a cornerstone of that act. Would this be an avenue where now we have the NBOs originating this conversation, leading to their own practices in terms of developing a code of conduct, as opposed to saying that we are on a gray list? Because a gray list is instilling fear. Even me, I don't know what is this grey list if you define for me. So if you told me we are on a grey list, probably it's not even very attractive to me, because I will say, who cares? Who put us in grey list? We even don't know who are those who are grey listing us. I mean, so you see, that is in terms of where we've come from. For the last 60 years, in the trenches, fighting for democracy, and again, I have a question for my colleague from Uganda. Uganda is not on the grey list anymore, isn't it? But what is happening in Uganda in terms of civil society practice is not attractive. I mean, when you look at, because we work also closely with wherever. So I think it would be very interesting to also share that, because I think Ugandan CSOs admire Kenya CSOs in terms of their practice. And they are on record. They haven't done a study tour to our country to see. Even I think Zimbabwe also came here. Even Zambia CSOs also came here. And of course, DG, you must be happy that you are a leading example in the region. But again, we are not like, we are bad as such to be synonymous with the grey list. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brian, for inviting me to this conversation, and I very much enjoyed learning a lot from our able panelists and also the key address. My name is Elkano Wario. I work for the Institute for Security Studies, and I coordinate a regional observatory on organized crime for the Institute for Security Studies here in Nairobi. I have two questions, one to Bernadette and then the other one to Suba. For Bernadette, kindly at least expound on the 8 risk factors that you mentioned, perhaps so that individuals in this room could understand. And I agree with the last speaker who asked the question about what is FATF, what is this, what is that, so that at least we put the discussion on this within the broader discussion around anti-money laundering and terror financing. The key idea here is recommendation 8, which is part of the FTF recommendation that's supposed to protect non-profit organizations from potential financial through effective risk-based measures. It's whole loaded with so many terms. What is risk-based measures? Understanding of what the FTF wants us to do with regard to the NGOs. Secondly, my question is our new amendment act that has been passed very recently, which is part of addressing the MER report. Key things. One is, how does it impact on ordinary Kenyans, especially around money transfers? Because unlike before, this new law has added many non-designated financial institutions as part of the things that is supposed to be supervised. The NGOs, which we will hope that following the Uganda's example, they can be removed from that list. Casinos, betting companies, which is important, real estate, and so on and so on, cryptocurrencies. But important for every Kenyan here in this room and elsewhere is the issue of mobile money transfers. Will that really mean that now every transfers you do, every single money you receive from outside or within, and M-Pesa is global in that, for that matter, it's not just within Kenya. Kenyans, and how are we preparing Kenyans to understand more powers? But do we have the will? Politically exposed individuals who may engage in laundering money on behalf of the elites. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, okay, sir. My name is Peter Kiama, working with the Haki Yetu organization in Mombasa. I'm a student this morning. I came in knowing almost nothing about this conversation, but I've learned a lot in the last few hours, and I thank the team that is leading us, Muhuri and others, in this conversation. My question is to Bernadette, having done that study, maybe to speak to us about your experience around the interplay between the Prevention of Terrorism Act and this countering terrorism discussion we are having, because I know that before 2013, before Westgate terrorism attack, we had a lot of contestation between the state and civil society in terms of developing a new law against terrorism. But I think at 2013, the government moved very fast to put the law in place. And there was a lot of public goodwill because of the experience of Westgate. And so we didn't really have a proper national conversation when we were developing that law. And there were reservations, especially around how you classify organizations that are deemed to be supporting terrorism or sympathizers of terrorism. So I don't know what is your experience as you work on this anti-money laundering area, and also the terrorism financing business. What is your experience around that interplay between the two laws that come into play as you address the NPO sector? Thank you.
We'll take the last question, panelists, and then we'll.
Check. Good afternoon. My name is Clinton of Ochieng from K24 TV. Just last week, the head of NIS came out clearly in front of the cameras and said, on the issue of terrorism, we don't have enough weapons to fight and protect our borders, right? Now, today, the regulators are coming here and telling us that we are on the gray list within the Eastern Africa. We were on the gray list. We are almost on the black list, which puts us in this state, damaged reputation and poor trust from investors, right? When are you guys, as the regulators, will come and call the media and say, these are the solutions that are in place? These are the initiatives that we have put in place to stop money laundering in this country, instead of all the time just telling us all the problems that we have, instead of providing the solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. A hard-hitting one for the last one. I think you can begin with Suba.
Yeah, thank you very much. Some of the questions are would require such elaborate answers that we would spend a whole day here. But we'll attempt to highlight some of the salient features. Of course, one of the assumptions we made was to imagine that everybody in this room is on the same page in terms of what we are talking about. So we did not even bother to define what Financial Action Task Force is in the first place. But for starters, you know, the Financial Action Task Force is the global standard setting body on anti-money laundering and financing of terrorism and proliferation of small arms. And if you, the journalist there has talked about the Director General of NIS talking about, you know, proliferation of small arms and so on. Yesterday there was a very interesting story in The Nation, which for some of us who have engaged in these processes attracted my attention. There's a Kenyan in prison or in police custody in Marrakesh, Morocco, on some of these things we are talking about. And this Kenyan is accused, and there seems to be a lot of evidence tabled by the government of the United States that he has been trying to help a criminal gang in Mexico to acquire arms to escort drugs into the US through the high seas. And so Mr. Uma, you know, a Kenyan by birth and identity, was presented in a court of law in Marrakesh. And you've been seeing a lot of stories about, you know, drug trafficking and so on. It therefore does not come as a surprise that the last mutual evaluation review that put Kenya on the grey list established that fraud, forgery, and which was the third one? It was fraud, forgery, and drug trafficking were the main drivers of money laundering and illicit financial flows. And Kenya being at the border with Somalia, and that of course stems from our report that Benedict Assembly alluded to, some of the groups that were coming out are those that tend to do a lot of human rights and humanitarian work along that corridor. The report is a public document and you can access it. Maybe one of us will give you the link to access a soft copy. So it's a public document that was launched by the government, and the guest of honor was Dr. Raymond Omolo late last year. And so those standards are then not directly implemented by FATF itself, because FATF is global. So they are FATF like regional bodies. And for Kenya, we have the Eastern and Southern Africa Money Laundering Group, ESAMLAG, that does the enforcement of those standards, monitoring and evaluation. And so when the Director General was talking about being put to task in Tanzania, it was by ESAMLAG, because every region has, in Africa particularly, has similar bodies that do us, and part of the reason why we are doing this information sharing with our brothers from the South under ESAMLAG. And so that will suffice for what FATF is. In terms of the laws that have been amended or amendments that have been undertaken, so Kenya as a country, looking at some of the gaps, inadequate or unsuccessful prosecution, for example, of people involved in money laundering and so on and so forth. The other thing that was actually pointed out that Kenya has all these multiple, registration and regulatory regimes for the NPOs, yet, there seems not to be coordination between the different regulators, and that for me is the beauty about this conversation and dialogue, because then it will be able to and of course tied to regulation, and now talking about the Public Benefit Organizations Act. One of the things that motivated us to initiate the PBO bill was that as people were closely involved in the constitution making process, we were asking ourselves, now that we are setting standards for people in leadership, and we were some of the movers and people in the front line pushing for Chapter 6 on leadership and integrity, is it not good for us as a sector to stand on a higher model around the PBO Act, started way back in 2009, the 2010 Constitution. And the Constitution was part of it, and of course Sessional Paper number 1 of 2006, that also pointed out at this mutual suspicion and lack of trust between the sector and the regulators and government overall. And so that was very, very key. But tied to this so-called regulation, in fact, when you talk about regulation under the PBO Act, the real terminology should be co-regulation. Co-regulation because it is a shared responsibility. The provisions of the PBO Act, you will see, establishment of self-regulating forum will have a code of conduct that looks into their own internal processes and threshold of transparency, accountability, and what is demanded of all Kenyans under Chapter 6 of the Constitution. And that means, therefore, that whatever self-regulating forums that are contemplated under Section 25 and also under the National Federation will have to be led by people and institutions that enjoy legitimacy. And part of the challenge we have suffered in this sector is the complete and spectacular failure of the National Council of NGOs to do self-regulation. And so there have been a lot of factionalism, and that's why we the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, so that we deal with the issue of factionalism. But more importantly, self-regulation and so on. It's complete lack of self-regulation. You saw when hawkers were given freedom in this city. Hawkers, an individual hawker has no capacity to say you are blocking the passageway. And that's what we are encouraged as a sector to do. That, you know, you dismissed your staff and procedure. And we have seen cases in court involving our own colleagues in the sector where, you know, we have been slapped with, you know, penalties. We have been asked to pay damages to people we have dismissed and procedurally. So even as we celebrate the commencement of the PBO Act, we must, as the Director General said, be ready and bold enough to be to create peerage mechanisms that enables us to, you know, point fingers of accusation at each other before the overall regulator comes in, and that was, you know, the gist of it. But more importantly, we must this time around get the National Federation of PBOs right, because my worry, and I've seen signs of it, there are people out there who think it is going to be business as usual, and they are doing all manner of shenanigans, trying to. Yet we know that there are some of those who even delayed the commencement of this law. They were never interested. And one tragedy we have suffered as a country over the years is to entrust processes in the hands of people who never believed in it, right from independence. We have this inability as a country and as a people to entrust processes with people who believe in it. And I'm seeing the same, you know, tragedy befalling, you know, the National Federation of PBOs. But back to your question, and I think, I don't know whether I've answered all of them, but yes, the country is moving forward in terms of trying to get itself out of the grey list. In terms of political will, you know, that's where the trouble is. As a country, if no matter what we do, you know, engage in the talk to your regulator, as long as we do not hold politicians to account on monies they use to campaign, this money laundering business will never come to an end. And we have made efforts, and I know Transparency International has been leading us in this regard. As long as we allow politicians to raise monies in the manners they best know how, money laundering will never stop. And you see laundering. You don't need, you know, to be, you don't need to, and so everywhere in Kenya is an evidence of money laundering. And that's where to fix campaign financing and cap it so that we hold those that, you know, get into politics to account have not borne fruit, and that is part of the challenge we face. And because those politicians are funded through dubious means, through money laundering, they will always be hesitant to put in place mechanisms that, you know, close those taps of monies that they get. And so you see these challenges of reluctance to regulate the religious sector, for example. You see this to prosecute, which is one of the reasons that Kenya is on the grey list, and so on and so forth. So we are caught in a vicious cycle where and end with the political will, then with the political will, then you know, much of these efforts will not, in my view, you know, bear.
Thank you. Hilda, you can take the question from Joshua and then
Okay, I don't know how to respond to this. Uganda, I'll start with, so we are in the process of saving funding. And in the process of saving money, NGO Bureau, that was an independent body that was set up to give clear oversight over NGOs, as for one of the political commitments that we made when we were on the grey list, was taken back to the Ministry of Internal Affairs, which is a military ministry. So that came after Uganda was already what that has during the mutual evaluation, probably by the time we get to mutual evaluation, we'll have gotten back NGO Bureau back as the same autonomous body. We don't know about that. But that is one step backwards, and I get to realize why NGOs are coming to benchmark and see what you're doing, because we took a step backwards. But also we have elements of securitization of different NGOs, especially the ones that speak truth to power. That's a challenge that we've had for a very long time as a sector with the state. We are currently, our laws and policies, I guess also that's one of the reasons why NGOs have come doing it, but also different NGOs are doing it, coming up with shadow reports to inform the risk assessment.
So, thank you. I'll take risk factors. And before I expound on the 8 risks to the aspect of the threat, what is a terrorism faced by Kenya? You look in terms of the jurisdiction. And we've had incidences of terror attacks within the nation. So those comprises the risk factors that the threat can exploit. And if the threat exploits the vulnerability, sector-specific non-profit organizations, then the risks. And then that is when we come up with the risk factors that actually make the non-profit organization vulnerable for abuse of TF. It's not the classification. So the 3 first factors are interrelated. So we're saying if you're operating near a conflict zone, if your operation can bring you into contact with the terrorist organization, or in your operations you can actually be exposed to sympathizers. And those are risk factors, it's not a classification. And then the number 8 risk factor, we say if you're a faith-based organization. The other factors you'll find it's in terms of if a non-profit organization does not have the capacity to actually go and say, I gave out this amount of money to XY group, but I do not have the means to verify the use of the money. That could be one risk factor. So when you look into these risk factors, it's based on the threat and the vulnerability. And if the threat is abused, or rather if the threat abuses the vulnerability, then it results to that risk. So that's how the risk factors came about during our risk assessment. And because we want, and somebody was saying to demystify the word risk-based, the word risk-based we want to just say, if in your operation you're actually you're operating near a conflict zone, and this is one of the example I can tell you, I can be an NPO operating at the heart of Mogadishu, but I am not abused for TF. Is that true? So what you're saying is the likelihood of you being abused for TF could be high, but your awareness of your vulnerabilities of the conversation from my side will not touch on ML completely. It's purely illicit proceeds, and then you want to disguise it to the formal sector. So the bank in this in our conversation today, I will only fix myself to TF. And then I remember a terror attack will not happen without money. Cut the money, disrupt, and then the attack may take longer, or it will. Was it Friday? And we say the criminals have to get it right, but all of you have to have the sensitivity. You have to be right all the time. So you have to be aware of what the criminal mind is thinking and all that. And remember, the money is coming for TF will actually disguise the intent. it will not disguise the source. So when you know it could be legitimate, it could be illegitimate, and these are the ways TF manifests itself, you'll be well aware of how to do it. And we said the watchdog for TF will actually be law enforcement. And I will work for the authorities to make sure that the stakeholders for the non-profit organization are well aware, you are up, and you know, operating in Somali does not make sure that you're going to be abused for TF. And that is why I wanted us to have a conversation. We just want to lay bare the fact that there could be sympathizers. But have we criminalized sympathizers? No, it's not criminal. How do you even identify one? You may not. But you need to be aware to make sure that the intent of the monies that you're using is well aware. And because you're doing public good, your activities are not disrupted because of the perception that people have. Because every time we talk tourism financing and the perception is, I'll actually target XY non-profit organization, but that is not the intention, or that is not the mandate of the authority. The authority is just to monitor, quietly look for the data and validate, inform this sector, and do not disrupt the activities of a non-profit organization. I think the other thing I'll just want to mention is in regard to the POTA, the Prevention of Tourism Act. I think the function that we, or rather the CFT, Interministerial Committee, which comprises of now, the money is cut, the finances are not available for abuse of tourism or Tourism Act, and then the other movements. If you're suspected to be involved in one way, then we make sure that at least the travel ban, you're not able to move free. In that is to make sure that we have sessions with our stakeholders to sensitize them on how financial sanction, if there is a list that has come from the United Nations Security Council resolution. And in case there is somebody on that list, how do we ensure that the operations of the non-profit organization continue to operate? No one is leaving value on the table. Everybody goes with their share, and there's a terror attack and things like that. I think
because of time, it will be good for us to wrap up now and move into the next activity. This issue is quite new to a lot of the people in this room. We are all learning about. I want to check the pulse of the room and see whether we have managed to do a bit of that. Will you leave this panel with a bit of an understanding of mail and CFT issue? Thank you. By your hands, please. Good. I'm doing this so that the directors in the room can also ascertain that we've done a good job. Good. Thank you so much, and please can come off the stage. We really appreciate your involvement in this stage and in this conversation. I want to invite Catherine next for this next portion of the program.
Good afternoon. Yes. My name is Catherine from Article 19. We're an Eastern African office that focuses on freedom of expression and civic space protection. I am taking my time as we welcome the person I want to call next. I am honored to say thank you for joining us, and we've had a lot of conversations and promises, and I don't want us to be politicians today. It's very possible to say and then we do something different, right? So in Kenya we also do handshakes, but that is not what we are doing today. I want to welcome back our chief guest, or our chief speaker, Daktari. On this public forum that has no what we are recommending, because we believe in dialogue, we believe in discussion, and talking to each other helps us. And so, Daktari, I need you to confirm if you're willing. Let's be legal. Are you willing, ready, able?
Yeah, but before I put my signature, you know, I've got to give you a rider. But first of all, is to appreciate what we're doing here. And see, at least Joshua confirmed today that sometimes civil societies think they know everything. But at least today, I know Joshua did know FATF. And some other people, you know, And I'll tell you, when we went to the face-to-face meeting in Dar es Salaam, and we had the Law Society of Kenya people together with ISPAC. You know, when we talk about the FATF, the framework, there are very many people, the sectors, and it is not only you, so don't get scared that we are being plummed, you know. At least someone talked about the casinos. And when we are talking about movement of money, so it's not only us who were there. Central Bank were there, the banks were there, ISPAC members were there, LSK were there, FRC, Treasury, all of us. You now realize that it's a bigger group. Actually, the Kenyan group, we are 45 in number, and very many other people, you know. And so, for sake of information, you can go into the website and get to understand about the FATF, the global, as Churchill said. It's a global financial group that we are saying we've got to understand the movement of funds and all that. Joshua didn't say clearly when we are talking about, when we were discussing about someone who had a photocopier, and he was just told, do you want a business? Yes. Your work will be to be photocopying a lot of papers. And you know, the guy said, why not? It's okay, I'm fine. Bring the business, bring the money. Then he kept on. Later on, when the law to understand, kumbe this person was trying to use him as a conduit for other things, you know, cleaning the money in a photocopier farm. The guy is innocent, but he was doing a genuine business. Even us, I like what Churchill said, that some donors will come up with a condition for you to say, tell us where you are taking the money to and why and all that. But some will not. And I said last week in the course of when we were with the SDGs and in the media breakfast, do not be in a hurry to accept money. You've been told, just apply for this money. Kuna pesa iko hapa. We need to go back to that English saying, proverb that's saying, when the deal is too good, think twice. Several Kenyans are getting themselves in problems in other countries. You remember the other case when very many people were talking about rescuing that lady in which country was that? Yeah. And when you dig back and then you go, you will hear there were some very other funny stories behind it. Just do this once. Where would our mock about? That's the term we say in Kenya. So what we are only saying that all of us, and we are very clear from the to be associated with this conversation, so that all of us are going to be accountable. Yeah. You don't have to worry if you're doing the right thing. But if you are doing the wrong thing, definitely we will work on you. That one will not will not want to sugarcoat or negotiate. Because once it comes to issue of terrorism, all of us will be affected, isn't it? Gone are the days when we used to say it's only when you see someone in a council, that one is a terrorist. When the other day we were talking about Algiva, Bwire and the rest, even Joshua knows in our place, Kalenjin land, there are boys who got lost and we do not know where they are. Currently, actually, I know of a young man who used to study drones, a very brilliant young guy from Kalenjin land. Actually, we do not know where he is at the moment, but he's not dead and he's not in Kenya, but we do not know where he is. And he's a very smart, brilliant guy. You get what I'm talking about? So, we are required Our sector, immediate outcome 10-11 requires us, as Benedict has said, to develop a framework, and then we carry out all of us to understand, and that we will continue engaging in this conversation, so programming and all that for the entire country, and we will collaborate together. That one we will do together. Yeah, so that we will need to put my name.
I want to.
It's okay.
There's a signature. There's photos. I want. Every agreement has to. Tafadhali, come to the fore and sign. You can sign in black. And then we take just one photo, and then we'll have a next photo session outside. So that they don't say it was AI. The event never happened. We stand for a minute, we take that signature photo. I want to invite just the speakers from Zimbabwe to come. Ernest. Just Ernest to join this photo so that we are regional. I would invite Kiambu Road team, but I think they would. I'm waiting for that tea. When I come and knock and say I was invited to visit.
Sorry? The key speaker, the guy who gave the first keynote address. The police command, I don't know if it's called. He's asking why we are all. Yes, you should.
So the red are for one and the black are for. So we'll take one photo. Then we'll proceed. Just the same team outside. There's a better background for us to take a group photo, tafadhali. So one photo for the team that's here, and then the rest of us will join. So gentlemen and lady, please proceed. Okado will direct you. So we just give them 1 second. They'll be back in the room shortly.
Good. Thank you so much, everyone. As we wrap up this final session, we want to just have one conversation as we finalize. And really, it's understanding what we've accomplished today and what we aim to do moving forward. And I do hope that what we're understanding from this conversation is, first of all, that there's a lot to learn. There's quite a knowledge gap that we need to address. And we welcome all of you to be part of it. One of the ways in which we welcome you to be part of it is as the NPO working group, we are currently also recruiting our membership and continuing to grow the membership. So please engage with us, join with us. All the NPOs in the room who are interested in this topic, please engage either Fred or myself on this issue. We'd love to have you as a part of the working group. And as part of the progress of the working group, in the coming months, we'll be developing our strategy, which includes our strategy for how we'll work on issues of self-regulation, better co-regulation with government, and other issues around how we are going to comply with the requirements of the anti-money laundering laws. But beyond that, we are going to be looking to how to strengthen this NPO sector, how to ensure that we are transparency and accountability, and really looking at how we are. So that's going to be the objective of this conversation. And I welcome you all to please reach out, please register to be a part of the NPO. We are also going to have a validation meeting that will involve aim to accomplish. And as we wrap up,
I'll just have a very simple, just to say a big thank you to all who have taken their time to join us today. Back in Johannesburg in November last year, and we said we want to launch the Talk to Your Regulator concept, and Yona promised to support and steer up to date, and finally we have the Talk to Your Regulator concept launched, and you know, conversations between the NPO and the regulators. That is one. Two, as we all understand, back in 2015, then in my mind I never thought that one we will be sitting in the same room with a regulator and discussing conversations like this one. So it's been a long way. We've built very good relationships, and I hope and pray that it will continue being like that moving forward. The relationship will continue becoming strong. Say asanteni sana, asante DG for making time for us. Asante your team for assisting us in organizing this event. Asante InformAction, they've been our team that has really highlighted. Asante Kiambu Road. Kama ni zamani haingekuwa rahisi, si ndio? But we see them now sitting together in the room and discussing such conversations. Asante development partners wenye wako kwa room, GIZ and the rest. Asanteni sana, and everybody who has made time physically and online. I've seen people follow online since 8. For being with us the whole day. So we'll close at that. Tutaomba tu team and the team to give us the Kenyan national anthem, and then we will proceed for lunch. My colleague Nuru, lunch is on the 5th floor nimeambiwa. So my colleague Nuru will be standing there with the lunch. Usitoke bila kuchukua na maybe tutaendelea kuengage as time goes by. Asanteni sana and God bless you. So so there's a photo backdrop hapo nje, media backdrop. If you want to take a photo to remember this day, you're welcome, and we will also try as much as possible to do a group photo. I don't know if the space will be but the camera people will advise us. They're telling us we do it here, so we'll remove the chairs and not that. So we'll try and squeeze ourselves here and do a group photo as we proceed for lunch. And our guys are also connecting the national anthem. Asanteni sana, Mungu awabariki.
Mungu nguvu yetu, Stahili heshima, tuungane mikono pamoja kazini, kila siku tuwe na shukrani.